I don't think love works anymore. Not the way it used to. Not the way we were told it would. Because everything about it feels fragile now. Disposable. Temporary. I used to believe love was something you built and protected. Something you chose every day. Something that got stronger the more you worked through it. Now it feels like something people try on. Like an outfit. Like a phase. Like something that lasts until it becomes inconvenient. And maybe that's just my experience talking. Maybe I'm jaded, maybe I'm tired. But it's hard not to feel this way when you've watched effort get ignored, loyalty get tested, and consistency get replaced with excitement. It feels like the people who care the most lose the fastest. The ones who communicate openly get labeled too much. The ones who stay calm get called boring. The ones who try to build something stable get overlooked for something unpredictable. And I don't understand when stability became unattractive. When did peace start feeling dull? When did consistency start feeling optional? When did love turn into a competition of who cares less? Because that's what it feels like now. Who replies slower? Who shows less emotion? Who keeps more options open? Who can detach quicker? It feels like the winner in modern love is the one who invests the least, and that doesn't make sense to me, because love was never supposed to be strategic, it was supposed to be mutual, it was supposed to feel safe, it was supposed to feel intentional, but now it feels like leverage, it feels like power dynamics, it feels like emotional poker, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't affect me. I don't want to play games. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to protect myself. I don't want to withhold affection just to maintain mystery. But every time I show up genuinely, it feels like I lose. And after enough losses, you start questioning the system, not yourself, the system. Because if doing things the right way keeps ending the wrong way, you start wondering if the rules changed, and maybe they did. Social media makes everyone feel replaceable. Dating apps make options endless. Attention is constant. Validation is everywhere, so commitment feels outdated. Why work through something uncomfortable when you can scroll into something new? Why communicate through confusion when you can ghost and reset? Why fix when you can replace? And I hate that mindset, but I see it everywhere. And after a while, it makes you wonder if love is even designed to last in this environment. If loyalty is rare, if depth is rare, if patience is rare. And when something is rare, it's harder to find. And when it's harder to find, you start feeling like maybe it doesn't work anymore. Not because love isn't real, but because people aren't built to sustain it. And that's the scariest thought, because I don't want to become cold. I don't want to stop believing, but I'm tired of investing in something that feels unstable. I'm tired of building just to watch it collapse. I'm tired of thinking something is solid just to realize it was temporary. And maybe love still works. Maybe it's just harder to find. Maybe it requires more maturity than most people are willing to bring. But right now, it feels broken. Not love itself, but the way we handle it. And I don't know if that's pessimism talking or experience. I think what makes me say, I don't think love works anymore isn't bitterness, it's exhaustion. Because every time I try to approach it the right way, intentional, honest, consistent, it feels like I'm bringing depth into a space that rewards detachment. And after a while, you start feeling like you're built wrong for this era. Like maybe you care too much. Like maybe you expect too much. Like maybe you still believe in something that everyone else quietly downgraded. It feels like effort used to mean something. Now effort feels risky. Because the more you give, the more exposed you are. And exposure in modern dating feels dangerous. The one who opens up first is vulnerable. The one who commits first is replaceable. The one who expresses feelings first is too invested. So people hold back. They ration affection. They ration honesty. They ration effort. And when both people are rationing, nothing fully forms. It becomes this half-built connection where nobody is fully in, just partially attached and partially guarded. And that's where love starts to feel like it doesn't work, because love requires surrender, not recklessness. Not obsession, but surrender. You have to be willing to be seen, willing to risk loss, willing to invest without guaranteed return. And nobody wants to do that anymore. Everyone wants certainty before commitment, proof before vulnerability, security before effort. But that's not how love works. Love is built in uncertainty, it's built in risk, it's built in choosing someone without knowing the full outcome. And we live in a time where uncertainty feels intolerable. We want options, we want backups, we want insurance. So instead of building depth with one person, we keep one foot out the door just in case. And you can't build something real with one foot already outside. That's why it feels broken. Not because love itself stopped working, but because we approach it defensively now. And I get it. People have been hurt, people have been betrayed, people have been replaced, so they protect themselves. But protection can slowly turn into detachment, and detachment kills depth. You can't love deeply if you're constantly calculating exits. You can't bond securely if you're scanning for upgrades. You can't build trust if you're always half preparing for collapse. And I'm tired of feeling like I have to adapt to that. I don't want to love strategically. I don't want to care less just to stay safe. I don't want to pretend I don't feel strongly just to avoid looking invested. But when you keep getting hurt for showing up fully, you start wondering if maybe the world rewards the opposite. And that's where the doubt creeps in. Maybe love doesn't work anymore because too many people are operating from fear instead of intention. Too many people want the feeling of love without the responsibility of it. They want butterflies but not boundaries, excitement but not effort, chemistry but not consistency, and chemistry fades without consistency. Excitement fades without stability. Butterflies disappear when there's no structure holding them, so relationships collapse, and instead of reflecting, people reset, and the cycle continues. And when you've seen that cycle enough times, it's hard not to feel like something fundamental shifted, like the culture around love changed, like commitment feels heavier now, like loyalty feels optional, like patience feels outdated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are still people who believe in depth. Maybe there are still people who value stability. Maybe there are still people who don't treat connection like it's disposable. But when your personal experiences keep showing the opposite, it's hard to stay optimistic. It's hard to believe love worked when everything around it feels temporary. And I don't want to lose faith, but I also don't want to keep pretending it's easy, because it's not anymore, and maybe love still works, but maybe it only works when two people are equally ready to stop playing defense, and that combination feels rare, not impossible, just rare, and rare takes patience, and patience feels hard when you've already invested so much of it before. So yeah, right now it feels broken, but maybe what's broken isn't love. Maybe it's how we've learned to approach it, and that might be fixable, but only if both people are willing to actually build instead of constantly preparing to leave. Maybe the real reason I don't think love works anymore is because it feels like timing is always off. You meet someone who seems aligned, you connect, you talk for hours, you feel understood, and then something small shifts. Not dramatic, not explosive, just subtle. They pull back slightly. Energy changes, consistency drops, and instead of addressing it directly, things fade. That's what modern love feels like. Not endings, fading, no real closure, no real confrontation, just gradual detachment, and it leaves you questioning everything. Did I imagine the connection? Did I misread the depth? Did they ever feel it the way I did? Because when something ends without clarity, your mind fills in the blanks, and most of the time the blanks aren't kind. You start blaming yourself. Maybe I was too much, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe I moved too fast, maybe I didn't move fast enough, and that mental spiral gets exhausting. Love starts feeling like a puzzle with missing pieces. Like no matter how carefully you approach it, something unpredictable shifts. And maybe that unpredictability is what makes it feel broken, because love requires stability to grow. You can't build something meaningful on inconsistent ground. You can't plant something deep in unstable soil, and right now everything feels unstable. People are distracted, attention spans are shorter, validation is constant. It's hard to compete with instant dopamine because love isn't instant dopamine. It's slow burn, it's repetition, it's routine. It's choosing someone again and again, even when the excitement settles. And we live in a culture that constantly chases the next high. So once comfort replaces adrenaline, people confuse it with boredom. Once peace replaces intensity, people think something's missing. But peace isn't missing something. Peace is the goal. And maybe that's why love feels like it doesn't work anymore. Because people are chasing sparks instead of substance. They want fireworks every day, but fireworks aren't sustainable. They're loud, they're bright, they're temporary. Real love isn't fireworks, it's foundation, and foundations aren't flashy. They're steady, and steady doesn't trend well. Steady doesn't go viral, steady doesn't give you constant emotional spikes, but steady is what lasts. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've confused intensity with compatibility. Maybe we've confused excitement with alignment. Maybe we've confused attention with affection. And when those illusions fade, people assume love failed, but maybe love didn't fail, maybe expectations did. Still, it's hard not to feel tired. Because every time you start believing in something new, you're also bracing for impact. You don't enter connections open anymore. You enter them cautiously, guarded, prepared, and that guarded energy changes everything. Because love thrives in openness, and guarded hearts can't fully attach. So it becomes this cycle. People get hurt, they protect themselves, they enter something new with walls up. The connection never fully forms, it collapses. They say, see, love doesn't work. But maybe the walls are the problem. Maybe we're all trying to avoid pain so aggressively that we're also avoiding depth. And I don't know how to fix that, because I understand why people guard themselves. I do it too. After enough disappointment, you start building armor. But armor blocks connection just as much as it blocks harm. And that's the dilemma. How do you stay open in a world that keeps showing you how easy it is to be replaced? How do you trust when you've seen how quickly people move on? How do you believe in permanence when everything feels temporary? Those questions don't have easy answers. And that's why sometimes it feels easier to just say, love doesn't work anymore. Because admitting it feels broken, feels safer than admitting you're still hoping it does. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe I don't actually think love is broken. Maybe I'm just scared that I won't find someone who approaches it the way I do. Someone who values depth over dopamine, stability over sparks, consistency over chaos. Because if that kind of person still exists, then maybe love still works. It's just rare. And rare feels invisible when you've only experienced the opposite. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe the way we approach it is. And maybe the real challenge isn't finding love. It's finding someone who isn't playing defense the whole time, because love can't work if both people are preparing for it to fail. It only works when both decide to build, not brace, and that's what I'm still trying to believe. I think what really makes me say love doesn't work anymore is how disposable everything feels. Nothing feels permanent. Not feelings, not promises, not even history. You can spend months building something with someone. Routines, memories, habits, inside jokes, and then one day it's like it never happened. They move on, they reset, they rebrand their life without you in it, and you're left sitting there wondering how something that felt so real could be treated so lightly. It makes you question whether permanence even exists anymore. Because love used to mean endurance. It used to mean working through discomfort. It used to mean fighting for connection when things got complicated. Now it feels like the moment things feel heavy, people exit. The moment conflict shows up, people reconsider. The moment effort is required consistently, people get tired, and I'm not saying everyone is like that. But it's common enough that it starts to feel normal, and when something unhealthy becomes normalized, you start adjusting your expectations, you start lowering standards without even realizing it. You start telling yourself, maybe this is just how it is now, maybe I'm expecting too much, Maybe stability is unrealistic, and that's the dangerous part, because once you start believing depth is unrealistic, you start accepting less than you deserve. You start settling for half effort, half commitment, half presence, and half love never feels secure. It feels temporary. It feels like you're constantly on probation. Like you have to maintain value instead of simply being valued, and that's exhausting. Love shouldn't feel like an audition. It shouldn't feel like you're being evaluated weekly. It shouldn't feel like you're one mistake away from being replaced, but that's what modern dating culture does. It keeps everyone slightly disposable because there's always another option, and options change the psychology of commitment. Now, when people feel like there's endless supply, they don't invest deeply. They sample, they test, they compare, they upgrade, and depth requires focus. You can't build something meaningful if you're constantly scanning the horizon. And I'm tired of feeling like depth is rare, like loyalty is rare, like emotional maturity is rare. Because if those things are rare, then sustainable love becomes rare too. And when something becomes rare, it starts feeling mythical, like a concept instead of a reality. And I don't want love to feel mythical. I want it to feel grounded, attainable, real. But it's hard to believe in that when everything around you looks temporary. It's hard to stay optimistic when you've watched people replace long-term connections in weeks, when you've seen loyalty get overlooked for excitement, when you've seen communication get labeled as too intense. It makes you question if the qualities you value are even appreciated anymore. And I refuse to become colder just to survive in this environment, but sometimes I understand why people do. Because caring fully feels risky, showing up fully feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe when you've seen how quickly people pivot. So instead of opening fully, people guard. Instead of committing deeply, people hesitate. Instead of building, people browse. And browsing never creates attachment, it creates distraction. So maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore, because too many people are browsing instead of building. Too many people are entertaining instead of committing. Too many people are protecting themselves instead of participating fully. And when both people are slightly guarded, slightly detached, slightly prepared to leave, the connection never roots deeply, it stays surface level. And surface level love doesn't survive pressure. It collapses the moment something real tests it, and that collapse reinforces the belief. See, love doesn't work, but maybe love isn't failing, maybe it's just not being handled properly, maybe it requires two people who are equally tired of games, equally tired of ego, equally ready to stop scanning and start building, and that combination is rare, not impossible, just rare. And when something is rare, it takes time to find. But when you've already waited, already invested, already tried, it's hard not to feel discouraged. It's hard not to say, maybe this just doesn't work anymore. Because hope feels heavy when you've carried it through disappointment repeatedly. Still, there's a small part of me that refuses to fully give up, not because I haven't been hurt, but because I know what depth feels like, and I know I'm capable of giving it. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe it just feels misaligned. Maybe I haven't met someone operating at the same level yet, and maybe love only doesn't work when one person is building and the other is browsing. And next time I won't settle for someone who's just browsing, because I'm done treating love like something experimental. I want something intentional, and if that's rare, then I'll wait, but I won't pretend that what's common right now feels functional, because it doesn't, and that's why sometimes it feels broken. Another reason I feel like love doesn't work anymore is because nobody seems patient enough for it. Real love is repetitive. It's waking up and choosing the same person on regular days, not just exciting ones. It's having conversations that aren't aesthetic. It's working through misunderstandings. It's sitting in awkward silence sometimes. It's resolving conflict instead of avoiding it. and patience feels rare now. The moment something feels complicated, people start questioning compatibility instead of questioning their communication. The moment effort feels required, people start asking if there's someone easier. The moment discomfort shows up, people confuse it with wrong person. But discomfort isn't always misalignment. Sometimes it's growth, sometimes it's two different perspectives trying to learn each other. And learning takes time, but time feels expensive in a world where attention is cheap. It's easier to restart with someone new than it is to repair with someone familiar. It's easier to chase a fresh high than maintain steady connection. It's easier to scroll than sit, and when everything around you reinforces immediacy, patience feels outdated. But love has never been immediate. It starts fast sometimes, and sure, but it sustains slowly, and sustainability isn't exciting. It's disciplined, it's structured, it's built. And I think a lot of people want the feeling of falling in love, but not the responsibility of staying in love. Falling is automatic, staying is intentional, falling feels magical, staying feels deliberate, and deliberate takes effort, and effort feels optional now. That's what makes it feel broken. Because if two people aren't equally patient, equally committed to working through friction, the relationship never stabilizes. It stays fragile, and fragile things shatter easily. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it didn't work because it was never given time to become strong. You can't plant something and expect it to grow overnight, but people expect emotional security immediately. They expect certainty quickly. They expect perfection early. And when reality shows flaws, they exit instead of adjusting. And after experiencing that enough times, you start questioning whether anyone actually stays long enough to build something durable. It's exhausting to be the only one willing to sit in discomfort and talk it through. It's exhausting to be the only one committed to fixing instead of fleeing. It's exhausting to feel like you're building while the other person is evaluating, and evaluation kills intimacy. Because if someone is constantly assessing whether you're worth it, they're never fully in. They're half invested, half prepared to leave. And love doesn't grow in half investment, it grows in commitment. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe commitment does, maybe patience does, maybe resilience does. Because real love requires all three, and without them it collapses under the weight of normal human imperfection. And humans are imperfect, always, which means love will always require forgiveness, always require communication, always require choosing someone even when it's not convenient. And if people aren't willing to do that consistently, then yeah, it starts to feel like love doesn't work anymore, because nobody is sustaining it long enough to see it mature. And maturity is where love actually becomes powerful, not in the butterflies, not in the early intensity, but in the stability that comes after. And maybe we're just living in a time that glorifies the beginning but undervalues the maintenance, and maintenance isn't sexy, but it's essential. And I'm not ready to say love is dead, but I am ready to admit that patience feels endangered, and without patience, nothing lasting survives. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because nobody trusts it. Not fully, not without hesitation. Everyone says they want something real, but when something real starts forming, fear shows up faster than commitment. Fear of being replaced, fear of being cheated on, fear of being the one who cares more, fear of looking stupid. So instead of leaning in, people brace. They stay slightly detached. They keep backup options emotionally. They don't say everything they feel. They don't invest fully. And when two people are both protecting themselves at the same time, nothing deep ever roots. It becomes this cautious connection where both are waiting for the other to prove something first. Show me you won't leave. Show me you're serious. Show me I'm safe. But safety doesn't come from interrogation. It comes from participation. And participation requires risk. That's the part that feels lost now. Nobody wants to risk looking foolish for love, but love has always required that. You have to be willing to look foolish, to say I care first, to show up consistently even when you don't know the outcome, to invest without a guarantee, and guarantees don't exist. So instead of risking vulnerability, people risk nothing. They test, they observe, they calculate, they delay emotional investment until it feels secure. But emotional security doesn't grow from calculation. It grows from consistency, and consistency requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. It's a cycle, and when one part is missing, the whole structure collapses. So maybe love feels broken because too many people are trying to feel safe before they've actually built anything safe. They want certainty before commitment, but certainty is something you earn together, not something you demand up front. And I get it. Nobody wants to be hurt again. Nobody wants to feel like the fool who cared more. Nobody wants to invest months just to be replaced in weeks. But if both people are guarding themselves at all times, love never gets a chance to breathe. It suffocates under suspicion, it weakens under ego, it dissolves under comparison, and comparison is everywhere now. We compare partners to people online, we compare relationships to curated timelines, we compare our connection to someone else's highlight reel, and comparison erodes gratitude. It makes you focus on what's missing instead of what's present, and when gratitude fades, dissatisfaction grows, and dissatisfaction looks for alternatives, and alternatives are always available now, so commitment feels heavier than ever, because staying means choosing one thing in a world full of options, and that feels scary to people who haven't learned how to be content. And that's another part of why it feels like love doesn't work, because contentment is rare, and without contentment, nothing feels enough. Not the effort, not the loyalty, not the stability. There's always a what if, and what if is poison to commitment. What if there's someone better? What if I'm settling? What if this isn't the highest version of love? But love isn't about maximizing, it's about choosing. And choice requires focus, and focus requires discipline. And discipline isn't romanticized anymore. Excitement is, intensity is, instant chemistry is. But chemistry alone can't sustain anything. It ignites, it doesn't stabilize, and maybe that's why love feels like it fails. Because people confuse ignition with foundation. They fall fast, they burn bright, they collapse quickly. And then they say, see? Love doesn't work. But maybe what didn't work was patience. Maybe what didn't work was emotional maturity. Maybe what didn't work was two people being equally willing to commit without constantly scanning for something better. I don't think love stopped working. I think standards changed. I think attention got divided. I think ego got louder. And I think fear got stronger. And fear makes people protect themselves in ways that sabotage the very thing they want. So when I say I don't think love works anymore, maybe what I really mean is I don't see enough people willing to handle it properly. Because love is simple. People complicate it. Love is consistent. People are inconsistent. Love is intentional. People are distracted. And until two people show up ready to be disciplined about connection, not just excited about it, it's going to keep feeling unstable. And that's exhausting, because I don't want to approach love like a risk assessment. I want to approach it like a build. But building requires two architects, not one builder and one evaluator. And maybe that's the real challenge, not finding love, but finding someone who isn't quietly preparing for it to fail. Because love only doesn't work when someone stops working at it. And too many people stop the moment it requires effort instead of adrenaline. And I'm tired of adrenaline. I want foundation. And until I find someone who wants foundation too, it's gonna feel broken. Another reason it feels like love doesn't work anymore is because people are addicted to potential more than presence. They fall in love with what something could be instead of what it actually is. They fall for the idea, the fantasy, the imagined future. But when reality sets in, flaws, habits, differences, instead of adjusting expectations, they downgrade the connection. It's like people want perfection in a human body, and humans aren't perfect. So the moment imperfection shows up, doubt follows. She could be better, he could be more. This might not be the best I can get. And that mindset destroys contentment. Because if you're always wondering if something better exists, you'll never water what's in front of you. You'll keep browsing instead of building. And browsing doesn't create depth, it creates comparison. And comparison slowly poisons appreciation. You stop seeing what someone does for you. You focus on what they don't. You stop valuing consistency. You crave excitement. And excitement is unstable. Love isn't built on constant excitement. It's built on reliability, and reliability feels boring if you're addicted to adrenaline. That's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want peace, they want chaos that feels passionate. They want intensity that feels cinematic. They want love to look like a movie, dramatic, emotional, unpredictable, but real love is structured, it's routine, it's sometimes quiet, and quiet doesn't trend, quiet doesn't feel thrilling, but quiet is secure. And security is rare in a world that rewards unpredictability. So when someone gives you stability, it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortable gets labeled as not right, so they leave, and then they chase something that feels intense again, and that cycle repeats, and every time it collapses, they say, love just doesn't work for me. But maybe it's not love that's failing, maybe it's expectations, maybe it's the craving for perfection, maybe it's the refusal to accept that long-term connection requires compromise and discipline, because compromise doesn't mean settling, it means adjusting, it means understanding that no person will check every box, it means valuing depth over dopamine. And dopamine fades, depth stays, but depth requires maturity. And maturity isn't loud, it's subtle, it's calm, it's secure enough to not constantly question whether something better exists. And that kind of security feels rare right now. It feels like people want love to feel good every second, but no connection feels good every second. There are misunderstandings, bad days, moments of frustration, and if someone expects constant emotional highs, they'll leave the moment it feels neutral. And neutral isn't bad. Neutral is stable, but stability doesn't give you butterflies, it gives you peace, and peace feels unfamiliar in a culture addicted to stimulation. So yeah, sometimes it feels like love doesn't work anymore because people don't recognize it. When it's calm, they mistake chaos for chemistry. They mistake unpredictability for passion. They mistake anxiety for attraction, and healthy love doesn't feel anxious. It feels steady, but if someone's nervous system is used to chaos, steady feels boring, and boring feels wrong, so they leave something stable for something intense. And intensity fades, and the cycle repeats, and that repetition creates the illusion that love is broken. But maybe what's broken is the way people define it. Maybe love hasn't changed. Maybe we have. Maybe we expect too much fantasy and not enough responsibility. Maybe we want effortless depth, but depth is never effortless. It's built, maintained, protected, and protection requires discipline, and discipline isn't romanticized anymore. But without it, nothing lasts. Well, maybe love still works, but only for people who understand that it's not supposed to feel like fireworks forever. It's supposed to feel like foundation. And foundation doesn't crumble at the first sign of imperfection. It strengthens when both people decide to reinforce it. And that's the part that feels rare. Not love, but two people equally ready to treat it like something sacred instead of something optional. And until that alignment happens, yeah, it's gonna keep feeling broken. And sometimes I wonder if the reason love feels broken is because people are more afraid of vulnerability than they are of loneliness. Loneliness is uncomfortable, but vulnerability feels dangerous. Loneliness just feels empty. Vulnerability feels exposing. And exposing yourself in a world where people can replace you in days feels reckless. So instead of risking being fully seen, People present edited versions of themselves, curated personalities, controlled emotions, measured effort, and when two curated versions try to connect, the connection stays surface level, because depth only forms when masks come off, and masks are safer. Masks protect ego, masks protect pride, masks protect image, but masks also block intimacy, and intimacy is what makes love feel alive. Without intimacy, you're just sharing space, and shared space isn't the same as shared depth. Maybe love feels broken because nobody wants to be the first one to remove the armor. Nobody wants to be the one who says, I care, without knowing if it'll be reciprocated. Nobody wants to look foolish, but love has always required risk, and if risk tolerance is low, depth tolerance is low too, and low depth means fragile connection, and fragile connection collapses under normal human imperfection. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it never had the chance to, because it was protected too heavily. You can't build something strong if both people are guarding themselves more than they're investing. And that guarding energy feels everywhere now. It feels like people are in relationships half committed, half prepared to exit, always scanning, always evaluating, always calculating, and calculation kills spontaneity. It kills surrender. It kills the soft parts of love, because soft parts require trust, and trust requires time, and time requires patience, and patience feels scarce. So people rush into feelings but hesitate into commitment. They want intensity without obligation, connection without responsibility, attention without accountability, and that imbalance makes everything unstable, because love isn't just emotion. It's discipline, it's consistency when things feel normal, it's showing up when excitement fades, and showing up isn't glamorous, but it's powerful, and maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've glamorized beginnings and neglected maintenance, maybe we've romanticized sparks and ignored structure, and when structure isn't present, collapse feels inevitable, so love starts to feel broken, not because it doesn't exist, but because it isn't being handled with care, and care requires emotional maturity, and emotional maturity isn't common, it's developed, and development requires self-awareness, and self-awareness requires reflection. And reflection requires sitting with discomfort, and a lot of people avoid discomfort at all costs. So instead of reflecting, they replace. Instead of adjusting, they exit. Instead of building, they restart. And restarting feels easier than repairing. But restarting resets the lesson too, and the cycle continues. And after watching enough cycles, it's hard not to feel like love is just temporary. Like everything eventually fades, like no one really stays. But maybe the problem isn't love, maybe it's our attention spans, maybe it's our tolerance for imperfection, maybe it's our fear of being fully seen, and maybe love only works when two people are brave enough to risk looking foolish for it, brave enough to commit without constant comparison, brave enough to stay when it's not cinematic, brave enough to build when it's not exciting. And that kind of bravery feels rare, but rare doesn't mean non-existent, it just means selective. And maybe the reason love feels broken to me is because I've seen too much avoidance and not enough bravery. But that doesn't mean bravery doesn't exist, it just means I haven't experienced it consistently yet. And that's frustrating, but frustration doesn't equal impossibility. It just means the standard is high, and high standards take time to align with. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe it's just misused. And until two people approach it with equal discipline and equal depth, it's going to keep feeling unstable. But I still believe, even if it's quiet belief now, that real love requires courage. And courage isn't loud, it's consistent. And when I find someone consistent enough to stay through discomfort instead of running from it, maybe it won't feel broken anymore. Maybe it'll finally feel built. There's another truth I don't always say out loud. Sometimes when I say I don't think love works anymore, what I really mean is I'm scared to believe in it again. Because believing in it requires hope, and hope is heavy when you've watched things fall apart more than once. It's easier to say love is broken than to admit you're afraid of being hurt again. It's easier to act detached than to admit you still want something real. It's easier to lower expectations than to risk disappointment. But the reason it still frustrates me so much is because I do believe in depth, I believe in loyalty, I believe in consistency, I believe in choosing someone and actually staying. So when I look around and see temporary everywhere, it feels like I'm out of place, like I'm built for something that isn't common anymore, and that can make you feel isolated. Because you start wondering if you're unrealistic, if you expect too much, if maybe you're the one who needs to adapt. But adapting to a culture that treats connection lightly feels like losing something essential, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to become someone who keeps emotional backups. I don't want to become someone who leaves at the first sign of discomfort. But when you keep getting hurt for caring deeply, you start questioning if depth is sustainable. You start questioning if maybe emotional availability is a liability. And that's where it starts to feel broken, because when emotional maturity feels like a disadvantage, something is misaligned. If being honest gets you labeled as too intense, if being consistent gets you labeled as too predictable, if being loyal gets you taken for granted, then it feels like the traits that build love aren't valued anymore, and that's exhausting. Because I don't want to play a game where detachment wins. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to maintain power. I don't want to approach relationships strategically. I want to approach them intentionally. And intentional love requires two people who are equally committed to depth, not one person building and one person browsing, not one person healing and one person distracting, not one person fighting and one person evaluating, two people building together. And maybe that's why it feels broken, because alignment like that feels rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because it requires both people to be self-aware enough to recognize what they're building. And self-awareness takes work, and not everyone does the work. But here's something I'm slowly realizing. Just because I haven't experienced that alignment consistently doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found someone operating at the same emotional frequency yet. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people who are still figuring themselves out, still healing, still exploring, still distracted, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if two people aren't equally ready, love will always feel unstable. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe timing is, maybe readiness is, maybe emotional maturity is, and that's a different problem than love itself. Because love, real love, still requires the same ingredients it always has: trust, patience, consistency, effort, communication, choice. Those haven't changed. What's changed is how many people are willing to commit to them long term. And that's what makes it feel fragile, but fragile doesn't mean impossible. It just means selective. And maybe the reason it feels broken is because I haven't experienced the selectivity paying off yet. So do I really think love doesn't work anymore? Or am I just tired? Tired of building with people who weren't ready? Tired of investing in connections that weren't aligned? Tired of watching things collapse because one person stopped trying? Maybe what feels broken isn't love. Maybe it's my optimism. Maybe it's my patience. Maybe it's my energy. Because loving deeply takes energy. Believing in something lasting takes courage. And after enough disappointment, courage feels heavy. But here's what I know. I don't want temporary. I don't want half effort. I don't want something that collapses the moment it feels normal. I want stability. I want intentionality. I want someone who doesn't get bored when peace replaces intensity. And if that's rare, then I'll accept that it's rare. But I won't accept that it's impossible, because I know I exist. And if I exist, someone who still believes in depth and loyalty and consistency, then that means other people like that exist too. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works because it's not common anymore, but uncommon doesn't mean extinct. It just means it requires discernment. It requires patience. It requires walking away from people who treat connection casually. And maybe that's the real shift. Maybe love doesn't work when we try to force it with the wrong people. Maybe it only works when both people are equally disciplined about it. And discipline isn't flashy, but it's powerful. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it's just rare enough that you have to be selective about who you build it with. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I refuse to become cold just because it's hard. I refuse to downgrade my depth just because others operate shallow. And one day, when two people who both believe in building, not browsing, meet each other, love won't feel broken. It'll feel intentional. And intentional love, that still works. There's a point where saying love doesn't work anymore becomes less about love and more about self-protection. Because if I convince myself it's broken, then I don't have to risk it again. If I label it dysfunctional, I don't have to open up. If I tell myself everyone leaves, then no one can surprise me when they do. It becomes armor. And armor feels safer than hope. Hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires believing someone will show up differently than the last person did. Hope requires trusting that the next connection won't collapse the same way the others did. And that's hard, because patterns create expectations. If you've seen inconsistency enough times, you start expecting it. If you've been replaced quickly, you start bracing for it. If you've watched effort go unmatched, you start rationing yours. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop loving the way you used to. You become careful, measured, guarded. You don't say everything you feel. You don't invest as quickly. You don't attach as deeply. And then when something ends, it hurts less, but it also meant less. And that's the trade-off nobody talks about. If you protect yourself enough, you reduce pain, but you also reduce depth. And depth is the whole point, so maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because I've been loving defensively. Not fully, not recklessly, but cautiously. And cautious love never fully blooms. It survives. It doesn't flourish. And surviving isn't the same as thriving. Maybe I'm not doubting love. Maybe I'm doubting whether I can afford to feel that deeply again. Because feeling deeply means risking loss deeply. And loss has weight. And carrying that weight repeatedly makes you tired. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If I stop believing in love because others mishandled it, then I let their behavior reshape my character. And I don't want that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to operate from fear. I don't want to treat every new person like they're already guilty of someone else's mistakes. But healing doesn't happen instantly. Trust doesn't reset overnight. And rebuilding optimism takes time, so maybe love isn't broken. Maybe I'm just rebuilding my trust in it. Maybe what feels like cynicism is actually exhaustion. Maybe what feels like disbelief is actually disappointment that hasn't fully healed, because when I'm honest with myself, I still want depth. I still want consistency. I still want something stable and intentional. If I truly believed love didn't work anymore, I wouldn't still crave it. I wouldn't still think about it. I wouldn't still care this much. The fact that I'm frustrated proves I still believe in it. You don't get frustrated over something you've given up on. You get frustrated over something you still want, but haven't found. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe love isn't broken. Maybe my patience is just being tested. Maybe my standards are filtering out what doesn't align. Maybe every failed connection isn't proof that love doesn't work. Maybe it's proof that misalignment doesn't. And misalignment is common. But alignment is rare. And rare things take time to find. So maybe I need to stop saying love is broken. Maybe I need to say love is selective. Maybe I haven't experienced the right version of it yet. Because the version I want, stable, mutual, disciplined, requires two people equally committed to depth. And depth isn't everywhere. But it exists, I exist, which means someone else like me exists too. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people at different stages of emotional maturity, different levels of readiness, different levels of self-awareness, and that doesn't mean love is dead. It just means timing matters, and readiness matters, and alignment matters. So yeah, some days it feels broken, some days it feels like effort goes nowhere, some days it feels like loyalty isn't valued, but deep down, I don't think love stopped working. I think I'm just tired of building with people who weren't built to stay. And that's different, because when two people are both ready, not just interested, not just attracted, but ready, love doesn't collapse easily. It stabilizes, it deepens, it roots. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it just requires the right two people at the right time. And until that alignment shows up, it's gonna feel unstable. But I'm not done believing in it. I'm just more careful about who I build it with, and that's growth.
Not defeat.
She replaced me in a week, 7 days, and I've replayed that number in my head more times than I'd like to admit. Because when something you invested months, maybe years, into gets swapped out in 7 days, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes you. It makes you question your perception, it makes you question your value, it makes you question whether what you had was ever real in the first place. I keep thinking about how we ended the conversations, the tone, the way she said she needed time, the way she said she had to focus on herself, and then a week later there's someone else standing where I used to stand. So what was the truth? Was she grieving while I was still loving? Was she detaching while I was trying? Was I the only one still emotionally present toward the end? Because you don't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. That's the part that keeps echoing in my mind. You don't wake up on Monday heartbroken and by Sunday decide you're ready for someone new. That's not healing, that's transition. And if she transitioned that smoothly, that quickly, then maybe I wasn't as permanent in her world as she was in mine. And that realization stings more than the breakup itself, because breakups hurt. But being replaced fast, that attacks your identity. It makes you feel temporary, it makes you feel interchangeable, it makes you feel like you were just holding a spot until something better came along. And I hate that my mind even goes there. But when someone replaces you in a week, you start asking dangerous questions. Was I not enough? Was I boring? Was I too available? Did she already have him lined up? Was I just comfortable, not essential? And the scary part is, your brain doesn't just ask those questions, it starts believing them. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. You start imagining that he must have something you didn't. More excitement, more dominance, more money, more mystery, more something. And now it feels like you lost a competition you didn't even know you were in. But love was never supposed to be competitive. It was supposed to be intentional, chosen, protected. And if she could swap me out in 7 days, then maybe what we had wasn't as protected as I thought. Maybe I was fighting for something that was already slipping away. Maybe I was loving someone who had already emotionally exited. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that she found someone new, but that she found someone new that quickly, because that speed tells a story. And I'm still trying to figure out what that story says about me. I think what really messed with me wasn't just that she replaced me, it was how effortless it looked, how natural she made it seem. Like I was just a chapter she flipped past without rereading, because I'm still here sitting with it, still replaying the last conversations in my head, still wondering if I missed signs, still trying to understand where it actually started falling apart, and she's already smiling next to someone new. That kind of speed doesn't just hurt, it humiliates you. It makes you feel like you were the only one emotionally invested at the end. Like while you were trying to fix it, she was already detaching. Like while you were thinking, we just need time, she was thinking, I need someone else. And the scariest part, I don't know which version of reality is true. Was she already talking to him before we ended? Was I slowly being phased out while I was still trying to show up? Or did she just move on that fast because she can't be alone? Every scenario hurts in a different way. If she was already lining him up, then I was loving someone who was preparing my replacement. If she just needed validation that quickly, then I was never the emotional anchor I thought I was. And if she genuinely didn't feel anything after it ended, then maybe I meant less than I believed. That's what a 1-week replacement does to your mind. It makes you question the entire foundation. You start rewriting memories. That time she seemed distant, that time she picked a fight out of nowhere, that time she said she felt confused. Now they don't feel random anymore. Now they feel like early signs of an exit. And the worst part is realizing that you might have been the only one still emotionally inside the relationship toward the end, because you can't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. And that's the sentence that keeps echoing. Halfway gone. Maybe she left emotionally months ago. Maybe I was loving someone who had already checked out. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of the end. Maybe it was just the announcement, and that realization shifts the pain, because now it's not just heartbreak, it's feeling blindsided, it's feeling like you were operating on outdated information, like you thought you were both building, but she was already packing. And I hate that this makes me question my value, because logically, I know someone moving on fast doesn't define me, but emotionally, it feels like it does. It feels like I was replaceable, interchangeable, temporary, and nobody wants to feel temporary in something they treated as permanent. I keep thinking about how deeply I committed, how I shut down distractions, how I defended her when people doubted us, how I chose her repeatedly. And now it feels like I was the only one guarding something she was willing to trade. That's what makes it feel unfair. Not that she moved on, but that she moved on like it was easy, like I was just space that needed to be filled. And that's the dangerous thought, because I wasn't just space. I was time, I was effort, I was loyalty, I was presence. And if she could replace all of that in 7 days, then either she never fully valued it, or she never fully processed it. And I don't know which one hurts more, because if she didn't value it, then I misjudged everything. And if she didn't process it, then she's just distracting herself. But distraction still feels like replacement when you're the one left behind. And I'm left here trying to rebuild confidence that got shaken by a 7-day timeline, trying to remind myself that speed doesn't equal significance, trying to remember that depth doesn't get erased overnight, because if what we had was real to me, then it was real, even if she replaced it quickly. But still, 7 days. That number doesn't just represent time, it represents how fast someone can move on when you thought you meant more. And I'm still trying to figure out what that says about her and what it doesn't say about me. The part nobody prepares you for is how fast replacement attacks your confidence, not just your feelings, your confidence, because heartbreak hurts your chest, but being replaced quickly hits your ego. And ego isn't pride, ego is identity. It's how you see yourself. And when someone moves on in a week, your brain starts filling in blanks you never wanted to think about. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. What does he have that I don't? Is he more exciting, more unpredictable, more emotionally unavailable, more dominant, more detached? Did she need someone less steady, less serious, less invested? You start dissecting yourself like you were the problem to be solved. And that's dangerous, because now it's not just about her moving on, it's about you feeling like you lost to someone else, like this was a competition, like you were weighed against another option and didn't measure up. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about. If someone can replace you in a week, they didn't replace you. They replaced the role, they replaced the attention, they replaced the space, they replaced the feeling of not being alone. But connection, real connection, that doesn't get swapped that quickly. You can substitute company, you can substitute validation, but you can't duplicate depth overnight. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because when you see them laughing together, posting together, looking comfortable together, your mind doesn't care about logic. It sees images and it translates them into meaning. They're happier. She upgraded. You weren't enough. But images don't show history. They don't show inside jokes. They don't show late night vulnerability. They don't show how deeply you invested. They show a moment, and moments are easy to manufacture. Depth takes time, and if she replaced me in 7 days, then either she had already emotionally left long before we officially ended, or she doesn't process loss the way I do. And both are hard to accept, because if she left emotionally before I did, then I was loving someone who was already gone. And if she doesn't process loss deeply, then I was loving someone who doesn't sit with pain. She escapes it. And escape looks like replacement when you're the one grieving. I won't lie though. Part of what hurts is feeling disposable. Like I was just a chapter. Like I was just a phase. Like I was someone she needed for that season. And once it was over, I was easy to move past. But here's what I'm starting to understand. People who move on that quickly aren't necessarily healed. They're avoiding, they're filling silence, they're covering discomfort, because sitting alone after a breakup is uncomfortable. It forces reflection, it forces accountability, it forces grief, and not everyone has the emotional discipline to sit with that. Some people run straight into the next distraction, not because the previous person meant nothing, but because feeling nothing feels easier than feeling everything. And I need to remember that her timeline isn't a measurement of my worth. It's a reflection of her coping style. Still, that doesn't erase the sting, because I'm still here thinking about what we had. Still processing, still grieving, still reconstructing my confidence, and she's already building something new. That imbalance feels unfair, like I'm stuck in emotional traffic while she sped through the exit ramp, and maybe that's the hardest pill to swallow. Not that she found someone else, but that she found someone else while I'm still untangling myself from what we were. It makes you feel behind, like you're losing, like you're weaker for caring longer, but caring longer isn't weakness, it's depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So maybe the real truth is this: she replaced the position, but she didn't replace the impact. And if what we had was real to me, then it mattered, even if she chose not to sit in it, even if she chose speed over reflection, because I would rather be the one who feels deeply than the one who forgets quickly. 7 days might look like replacement, but sometimes it's just avoidance in disguise. And one day, when the distraction fades, she might finally sit with what I've been sitting with this whole time, and by then I'll be further ahead emotionally than she ever was, not because I moved on faster, but because I actually processed it. And that's something nobody can replace in a week. The worst part about her replacing me in a week isn't even the new guy, it's the silence that came with it, because when someone moves on that fast, they don't just leave you, they erase you. The calls stop, the inside jokes disappear, the routine you built together vanishes, and suddenly the person who used to know your schedule, your moods, your patterns is giving that attention to someone else. That's what makes it feel unreal, because it's not just that she found someone new, it's that she redirected everything so easily. The same energy, the same time, the same effort, just different face. And that's when your mind spirals into the dangerous place. If she can give someone else what she gave me that quickly, was it ever special? That question hits hard, because we don't just want to be loved, we want to feel irreplaceable. We want to feel like what we built had weight, like it left a mark, like it couldn't just be swapped out like a profile picture. And when she replaced me in 7 days, it felt like I was lightweight, like I was something she could carry easily and set down just as easily. But here's the thing I keep wrestling with. Maybe it wasn't easy. Maybe it just looks easy. Social media never shows grief. It doesn't show reflection. It doesn't show confusion. It shows highlights. And maybe what I'm seeing is the highlight reel of her coping, because moving on quickly doesn't always mean you didn't care. Sometimes it means you can't sit still with pain. Sometimes it means you need distraction to avoid accountability. Sometimes it means you'd rather build something new than examine why the last thing broke. But none of that makes it easier to watch, because while she's building new memories, I'm still dismantling old ones. I'm still processing the last conversation, still remembering the way she used to look at me, still trying to figure out when it started fading, and that imbalance makes you feel like you lost twice. You lost the relationship, and you lost the race to move on. And I hate that it feels like a race, because healing shouldn't be competitive. But when someone replaces you in a week, it feels like you're the only one still standing in the wreckage, like she walked away from the crash without even looking back, and you're still checking for broken pieces. What hurts even more is knowing I didn't have a backup. I didn't have someone lined up. I didn't have a just in case. When we ended, it was just me in the silence, and I chose to sit in it, not because I wanted to suffer, but because I respect what we had enough to process it properly. So when she jumped into something new that fast, it felt like I was the only one honoring the history, like I was the only one treating it like it mattered, and that's a lonely feeling, to believe something was significant and watch the other person treat it like it was temporary. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe she didn't replace me. Maybe she replaced the feeling of being alone. Maybe she replaced the discomfort. Maybe she replaced the emptiness, because some people don't know how to sit with themselves after something ends. They need noise. They need attention. They need someone new to prove they're still wanted, and if that's the case, then her moving on in a week says more about her relationship with silence than it does about my value. Still, that doesn't stop the thoughts, because at night, logic fades and emotion gets loud, and in those moments, it feels like I wasn't enough. Like if I had been better, stronger, more exciting, more something, she wouldn't have moved on that fast. But I have to remind myself, you can be enough for someone and still not be there forever. You can love someone deeply and still not be what they're built to keep. And if she could replace me in 7 days, then maybe I wasn't meant to stay in her life long term. Maybe I was a lesson. Maybe she was mine. But what I refuse to accept is that I was insignificant, because I know how I loved, I know how I showed up, I know how I committed, and those things don't become meaningless just because someone else moved quickly. If anything, they prove something about me, that I invest fully, that I don't keep backups, that I don't treat people like placeholders. And maybe that's rare. Maybe that's why this hurts more, because I wasn't halfway in. I was all the way in. And when you're all the way in, being replaced feels like being erased, but I'm not erased. I'm just healing at a pace that reflects depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but that week doesn't define my worth. It defines her coping speed. And one day when she finally slows down, she might realize you can replace a person's position, but you can't replace the way they loved you. And that's something no one swaps out in 7 days. There's a different kind of pain that comes from being replaced quickly. It's not just heartbreak, it's humiliation. And I don't mean humiliation in a loud, dramatic way. I mean the quiet kind, the kind where you sit alone thinking, how did I not see this coming? Because when someone moves on in a week, it makes you question your awareness. Were there signs I ignored? Did she emotionally detach months before I noticed? Was I holding on to something that was already slipping through my hands? And that's the part that messes with your head the most. Because now it's not just about losing her. It's about doubting yourself, your intuition, your judgment, your ability to read people. You start replaying moments that once felt normal. That random argument, that night she seemed distant, that time she picked up her phone and turned it away slightly, that period where she felt off but said she was fine. At the time, you trusted her words. Now you question everything, because if she replaced you in 7 days, your brain automatically assumes she had a head start. And whether that's true or not, the damage is the same. It makes you feel like you were the only one fully in it, like you were the only one fighting for something she had already decided to let go of. And that imbalance feels like betrayal, even if technically it wasn't, because the emotional timing didn't match. You were still invested, she was already transitioning, and that creates this gap A painful one, where you're grieving something she already processed, or avoided, or replaced, and it makes you feel late, like you're the last one to realize the relationship was over, and I hate that feeling, because I don't like feeling behind. I don't like feeling like I was operating with outdated information. I don't like feeling like I was loving someone who had already emotionally packed their bags, but maybe that's the reality. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of her detachment. Maybe it was the end of it. Maybe she had already done her grieving while I was still trying to fix things. And that realization hurts in a different way. Because now it's not just that she moved on fast, it's that she moved on before I even knew we were done. And I'm stuck here wondering when it actually ended. Was it weeks before the breakup? Months? Did she slowly disconnect while I was still showing up? Because that's the part nobody prepares you for. The possibility that you were loving someone who was already halfway gone. And if that's true, then I wasn't replaced in a week. I was replaced long before that. I just didn't know it yet. But here's the thing, I'm slowly starting to understand. Even if she emotionally left before I did, that doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me naive. It means I was committed. It means I was still trying. It means I was operating in good faith, and I'd rather be the one who stayed genuine than the one who quietly exited without saying it, because I know how I loved. I didn't keep options open. I didn't emotionally detach while pretending everything was fine. I didn't start building something new while something old was still alive. When I was in it fully. And if she replaced me in a week, then that says something about her capacity to detach, not about my capacity to matter. Still, that week will probably always sting, not because of the new guy, but because of what it symbolized. How quickly someone can shift focus, how fast attention can be redirected, how easy it can look to replace what felt permanent. But maybe permanence isn't about how long something lasts, maybe it's about how deeply it was felt. And if I'm still here processing it while she moved on fast, then maybe I was the one who felt it deeper. And that doesn't make me the loser. It makes me the one who actually experienced it. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I gave, and I refuse to let her timeline rewrite my value, because being replaced quickly hurts, but being genuine never does. There's something else that hurts about being replaced in a week. It makes you question whether you were ever chosen or just convenient, because if someone can transition that smoothly, that fast, it starts to feel like you were just occupying space, like you weren't irreplaceable, like you were temporary comfort, and nobody wants to feel like temporary comfort. I keep thinking about the way she used to look at me, the way she said things like, I don't see myself with anyone else, the way she made it seem like what we had was rare, and now I'm sitting here wondering how rare something can really be if it can be replaced in 7 days. That's what makes it sting. Because rarity isn't supposed to be swappable, depth isn't supposed to be interchangeable. If something is special, it's supposed to leave a gap when it's gone. But her life doesn't look like there was a gap, it looks filled immediately. And that creates this internal conflict. Was I overestimating my importance? Did I romanticize something that was lighter to her than it was to me? Because when you care deeply, you assume the other person feels the same weight. You assume the attachment is mutual. You assume the history matters equally, but being replaced quickly makes you realize something uncomfortable. Not everyone feels at the same depth you do. Some people attach fast and detach faster. Some people build quickly and rebuild quicker. Some people don't see relationships as something sacred. They see them as something seasonal. And maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe I treat connection like something that deserves reverence, and she treats it like something that deserves momentum, because momentum doesn't stop, it just redirects, and that's exactly what she did. She redirected. The same attention, the same affection, the same emotional energy, just different recipient, and that's hard to swallow because it makes you feel like the container didn't matter, just the feeling. But here's the part I'm slowly realizing. If someone can redirect their attachment that fast, then maybe what they were attached to wasn't you. It was the feeling of being with someone. And that's not the same thing. There's a difference between loving a person and loving the experience of not being alone. And if she loved the experience more than she loved me, then of course she could replace me quickly, because she wasn't replacing a soul connection, she was replacing the role. And that hurts, but it also clarifies, because I don't want to be someone's role. I don't want to be someone's emotional placeholder. I don't want to be someone's for now. I want to be chosen with intention, held with depth, missed when I'm gone. And if she could swap me out in a week, then maybe I wasn't held the way I thought I was. But that doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. It just means she didn't hold me deeply. And those are two different things. Still, there's something about the speed that keeps echoing. 7 days. It makes it feel like I didn't leave a mark, like I didn't leave impact, like I didn't leave space. But I know that's not true, because impact isn't measured by how long someone stays single. It's measured by what they learned, what they felt, what they carry forward. And even if she doesn't feel it now, one day when the distraction fades, when the excitement settles, when she's sitting in quiet, you might finally process what she skipped, and by then I won't be waiting. Because here's what I'm starting to understand. Being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person couldn't sit with loss, and loss reveals maturity. If I'm still here processing, still reflecting, still rebuilding, then I'm not behind, I'm just doing it properly. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase who I was, and I refuse to let her timeline determine my value, because I wasn't just someone she dated, I was someone who showed up fully, and that doesn't become meaningless just because someone else showed up faster. She replaced me in a week, but that week says more about her relationship with discomfort than it does about my worth. There's another layer to this that I don't talk about out loud. Anger, not loud anger, not screaming or crashing out. The quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest when you realize how easily someone redirected what you treated like sacred. Because I stayed loyal, I stayed committed, I stayed focused, and she moved on in 7 days. That makes you question fairness. It makes you feel like you played the game honestly while someone else was already preparing their next move. And I hate that it feels like a game, because I never approached it like one. When I was with her, I wasn't scanning the room for upgrades, I wasn't entertaining backups, I wasn't lining up options just in case. I was in it, fully, and now I'm sitting here realizing she either wasn't or she detached long before I knew. And that's what builds resentment. The idea that I was emotionally present while she was emotionally preparing. Because now it feels like I was loyal to a version of her that didn't exist anymore, like I was committed to something she had already mentally ended, and that realization stings. But here's where it shifts, because the anger starts turning into clarity. If she could replace me that quickly, then she was already disconnecting. And if she was already disconnecting, then the relationship wasn't as mutual as I believed. And if it wasn't mutual, then I wasn't losing someone who was fully invested. I was losing someone who was already halfway out. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it reframes it, because now it's not about me being not enough. It's about her not being anchored. Anchored people don't drift that fast. Anchored people don't swap attachments like playlists. Anchored people sit with loss, and if she didn't sit with it, then maybe she never held it deeply, and that realization hurts, but it also frees me, because I don't want someone who can replace depth with distraction. I don't want someone who needs constant attention to feel stable. I want someone who values history, who respects connection, who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable. And if she replaced me in a week, then maybe I was disposable to her. But that doesn't mean I'm disposable in general. It just means she wasn't built to keep me. And there's a difference. Still, There's a part of me that wonders if she ever thinks about it, if she ever pauses, if she ever compares, if she ever realizes how fast she moved, but I can't live in that space, because waiting for someone to feel what you felt is a trap, and I refuse to trap myself in her timeline. 7 days, that's how fast she moved, but here's the truth. I'd rather take my time healing than rush into something new just to prove I can. I'd rather rebuild properly than distract myself temporarily, because I know what I gave, and I know how I showed up. And I know I don't need to rush into something new to validate that. She replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself at a pace that lasts, and that's not weakness, that's depth. You know what else being replaced in a week does? It makes you question whether you were ever truly seen. Because if someone really sees you, your patterns, your effort, your loyalty, your depth, they don't just slide into something new like you were a temporary rental. They feel the absence, they sit in it, they notice the difference, and I keep wondering if she noticed the quiet after I stopped calling, if she noticed the lack of consistency I used to bring, if she noticed that the stability I provided isn't something you just duplicate overnight, or if she just filled the silence so fast that there was no space to notice it all. That's what hurt, the possibility that I wasn't deeply registered, that I was experienced but not understood, because there's a difference between being with someone and truly knowing them. And when someone replaces you quickly, it feels like they never fully knew the weight of what they had. It feels like they liked the experience of you, not the essence of you, and I can handle someone not choosing me. But it's harder to handle feeling like I was easy to move past. I keep thinking about how careful I was, how intentional I was, how I didn't play games, how I didn't keep backups, how when things got hard, I leaned in instead of pulling away. And in the end, it feels like none of that slowed her down. 7 days. That number keeps echoing like a clock ticking in reverse, because for me, 7 days after a breakup feels raw. It feels heavy. It feels like I'm still adjusting to the silence, but for her, 7 days was enough to build something new. And that contrast makes you feel like you loved harder than you were loved. And that's a lonely realization, because loving harder isn't something you brag about. It's something you feel when the other person moves on faster, and you're left holding the emotional weight. But here's what I'm starting to see clearly. Just because she moved on quickly doesn't mean she processed it deeply. Speed isn't strength. Speed can be avoidance. Speed can be distraction. Speed can be ego protection. Sometimes people rush into something new not because the old thing meant nothing, but because it meant too much. Because sitting alone would force them to face what they lost, and not everyone is strong enough to sit in that kind of silence, and maybe I am. Maybe the reason I'm still here thinking, reflecting, feeling, is because I actually let it hit me. I didn't numb it, I didn't immediately replace it, I didn't run from it, I sat with it, and sitting with pain requires maturity. It requires discipline, it requires emotional depth. So maybe this isn't about me being less valuable, maybe it's about me being more capable of processing, and that's not weakness, that's growth. Still, there's something about knowing she's creating new memories that stings, because those were supposed to be ours. The random laughs, the new places, the inside jokes. Now someone else gets that version of her, and I have to let go of the idea that it was only meant for me. And that's hard, but here's the truth I can't ignore anymore. If she could replace me in a week, then I was loving someone who wasn't built to stay long term. Because people who are built to stay don't detach that fast. They don't redirect that easily. They don't swap depth for novelty overnight. And I don't want someone who can treat connection like it's interchangeable. I want someone who understands the weight of history. Who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable? Who understands that real attachment doesn't reset in 7 days? So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself in a way that lasts longer than a rebound ever will. And when I look back at this one day, I won't just remember the hurt, I'll remember the clarity, because being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person wasn't anchored, and I refuse to confuse someone else's instability with my lack of worth. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I was. And one day, when I'm with someone who values depth the way I do, this week won't define me. It'll just be proof that I was never meant to stay where I was easily replaced. At some point, the hurt turns into something quieter. Not lighter, just quieter. Because you can only replay 7 days so many times before your brain gets tired of the echo. And when the noise slows down, clarity starts creeping in. I started asking myself a different question. Not why did she replace me so fast, but why am I measuring my value through her speed? Because that's what I was doing without realizing it. I was using her timeline as a mirror. If she moved on quickly, I must not have mattered deeply. If she looks happy, I must have been replaceable. If she didn't hesitate, I must not have left impact. But that logic is flawed. Her speed is not a measurement of my depth. Her distraction is not a reflection of my worth. Her ability to move forward quickly doesn't erase the way I showed up. And once I started separating those things, something shifted. Because I know how I loved, I know I was intentional, I know I was loyal, I know I didn't treat what we had like it was temporary. So if she did, that says something about her capacity, not my value. And I had to stop turning her coping style into my insecurity, because that's what I was doing. I was letting her rebound rewrite my confidence. I was letting her quick transition convince me I was forgettable. But forgettable doesn't leave you reflecting. Forgettable doesn't leave you rebuilding. Forgettable doesn't leave you questioning your own growth. What we had meant something, even if she chose not to sit in that meaning. And maybe that's the difference between us. I process, she replaces. I reflect, she redirects. I sit with the silence, she fills it. And neither is necessarily wrong, but one builds depth, the other builds distraction, and depth always wins in the long run. Because distraction fades, novelty fades, rebounds lose their adrenaline, and when that happens, whatever was avoided eventually resurfaces, and by then I won't be stuck in the same place, because while she rushed forward, I rebuilt properly, and rebuilding properly takes longer, but it lasts longer too. 7 days might have been enough for her to feel okay, but it wasn't enough for me to lose myself, and that's what matters. So yeah, she replaced me in a week, and for a while that felt like proof that I wasn't enough, proof that I was temporary, proof that I was easy to move past. But now it feels like proof of something else, proof that I love deeply, proof that I don't detach easily, proof that I don't treat connection like it's disposable. Because if I could have replaced her that fast and didn't, that says something. It says I value what I build. It says I respect history. It says I don't jump into something new just to soothe my ego. And I'd rather be the one who heals slowly than the one who forgets quickly. Because forgetting quickly doesn't mean you're strong. Sometimes it just means you're avoiding, and I don't want to avoid. I want to grow. I want to understand what worked, what didn't, what I tolerated, what I ignored. I want to rebuild my confidence without attaching it to someone else's timeline. She replaced me in a week, but she didn't replace my character. She didn't replace my loyalty. She didn't replace my ability to love fully. And one day, someone is going to experience that depth and recognize it immediately. Not treat it like a placeholder, not treat it like a phase, but treat it like something rare. Because rare things don't get swapped in 7 days. They get protected, so maybe this wasn't about me being replaced. Maybe it was about me being redirected away from someone who could move on that quickly towards someone who won't. 7 days hurt, but it also clarified. I don't want to be in a position where I can be replaced that easily ever again. And the only way to guarantee that is to choose someone who understands the weight of what they're holding. And next time, I'll be gone one day. Not in a dramatic way, not as a threat, not as a goodbye, just as a fact. One day I won't be this accessible, I won't be this available, I won't be this version of me. And sometimes I wonder Will people notice? Will they realize what I carried, what I gave, what I stayed through? Or will it only make sense when I'm not around to do it anymore? It's strange feeling invisible while you're still here. You show up, you check in, you stay consistent, you carry conversations, you give effort, you hold things together quietly, but it feels expected, like your presence is normal, like your loyalty is assumed, like your effort is just background noise. And that's when the thought creeps in. If I stopped doing this, if I pulled back, if I disappeared, would anyone feel the shift? Or do people only realize what you meant after you're no longer there to give it? Being the strong one rarely gets applauded. You're the one people vent to, the one who keeps it together, the one who doesn't break down publicly. So they assume you're fine. They assume you don't need reassurance, don't need checking in, don't need to be chosen loudly, because you've trained everyone to see you as stable. But strength can be lonely, carrying everyone else's emotions while quietly managing your own, smiling through things you never fully process. And sometimes you think, if I ever stopped being the strong one, would anyone know how to hold me? Or would they only realize what I was carrying after I put it down? There's a quiet exhaustion that comes with always being dependable. You don't cancel, you don't disappear, you don't make people question where they stand with you. You're solid. And because of that, people get comfortable. They assume you'll always answer, always show up, always understand. But no one asks how much it costs you. No one sees the days you wanted to shut down, the moments you needed someone else to take the lead. Being reliable is a beautiful trait, but when it's constant, it becomes heavy. And sometimes you think, if I ever stop carrying this role, will they notice the weight I was holding all along? What happens when the dependable one finally pulls back? At first, nothing. People assume you're just busy, just tired, just having an off day. But when the consistency shifts, when the long paragraphs turn short, when the constant availability fades, that's when they feel it. The silence hits different when it's coming from the one who never used to go quiet. And suddenly they notice what you used to do, the way you checked in first, the way you kept things from falling apart, the way you made everything feel steady. And it's not about revenge, it's not about proving a point, it's about capacity, because even the strongest ones get tired of being unheld. And when they finally step back, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, but it changes everything. Being gone doesn't always mean physically leaving. Sometimes it means emotionally detaching. Still replying, but not overextending. Still present, but not pouring the same energy. Still there, but no longer carrying what isn't yours. That shift is subtle. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you just stop overgiving. And the people who were used to your full capacity start to feel the difference, because now you're protecting your energy instead of offering it endlessly. You're choosing peace over being needed, and sometimes that's the real goodbye, not disappearing, just deciding you deserve to be poured into too. Being gone one day might not mean disappearing. It might mean evolving, becoming a version of yourself that not everyone gets access to anymore. The version that over-explains, that overextends, that tolerates bare minimum, gone. The version that accepts crumbs just to keep the peace, gone. Growth changes your availability. You don't respond the same. You don't tolerate the same. You don't give the same unlimited access. And some people will say you changed. They'll say you're distant, different, harder to reach. But what they really mean is you stopped being endlessly accessible. And sometimes being gone is just becoming too self-aware to stay in spaces that don't value you. The right people won't lose you when you grow. They won't complain that you changed. They'll adjust with you, because real connection isn't built on convenience. It's built on understanding. When you stop overgiving, the right ones won't call you distant. They'll ask if you're okay. When you set boundaries, the right ones won't feel attacked. They'll respect them. When you evolve, the right ones won't feel threatened. They'll evolve too. Growth doesn't push away what's aligned. It only exposes what was comfortable. And if one day you're gone because you chose peace over pressure, the people meant for you won't lose access. They'll meet you at your new level. One day, being gone might just mean I finally chose myself, not selfishly, not dramatically, fully choosing peace over pressure, fully choosing growth over familiarity, fully choosing reciprocity over exhaustion, because for a long time I chose understanding, I chose patience, I chose staying, even when it drained me. But one day I'll choose alignment, and that might look like distance to people who benefited from my overgiving. It might look like silence to people who only checked in when I carried things. But to me, it'll feel like relief, because being gone isn't always about leaving others. Sometimes it's about finally not leaving yourself. I'll be gone one day, but not in a tragic way, in a transformative way. I'll be gone from the spaces that drained me, gone from the roles that confined me, gone from the version of me that overgave just to be appreciated. And the people who only valued what I provided, they'll call it distance. The people who only noticed when I carried things, they'll call it change. But the ones who truly saw me, they'll understand, because being gone isn't disappearing, it's evolution. It's choosing peace over performance, reciprocity over exhaustion, alignment over attachment. One day I'll be gone, and it won't be because I faded. It'll be because I finally grew into a version of myself that refuses to stay where I'm not valued. And that's not a loss, that's a rebirth. There's a quiet kind of emptiness that doesn't feel dramatic. You're not falling apart, you're not in crisis, you just don't know why you're here. You wake up, you do what you're supposed to do, you get through the day. But underneath all of that, there's this question you don't know how to answer. What am I actually doing this for? You don't feel passionate, you don't feel called, you don't feel like anything is pulling you forward, and that scares you because everyone else seems so sure of where they're going. Having no purpose doesn't feel like sadness, it feels like drifting, like life is happening around you and you're just present for it, and no one really talks about that part. Not having a purpose doesn't mean you're failing, even though it feels like everyone else got some kind of direction you never received. Purpose isn't something people find all at once. It's not a switch that flips or a calling that suddenly appears. Most people are just moving it forward with something small and calling it certainty. So when you don't feel that pull, you assume something is wrong with you. But a lack of purpose often comes from pressure to have a passion, pressure to be exceptional, pressure to turn your life into something meaningful as soon as possible. And when nothing fits, you feel empty, not because you lack value, but because you're tired of forcing meaning where it doesn't exist yet. You're not behind, you're just in a season where life hasn't revealed what it wants from you. And that's more common than anyone admits. Purpose usually doesn't appear because you thought hard enough about it. It grows out of living, out of trying things without certainty, out of getting bored, out of noticing what quietly holds your attention when no one is watching. So when you feel like you're drifting, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're between definitions, between who you were and who you haven't met yet. Drifting feels uncomfortable because it lacks labels. You can't explain it easily, you can't point to progress, but drifting is still movement. It's the space where you learn what doesn't fit, what doesn't excite you, what you don't want to carry forever, and that information matters. You're not failing a purpose, you're collecting data, even if it doesn't feel productive yet. It's okay if your life doesn't feel meaningful yet. Meaning isn't something you wake up with one day fully formed. Most of the time it shows up quietly, in moments you don't think are important, in things you do without the audience, in small choices that don't feel like destiny. The problem is we're taught to look for purpose as something big, a passion, a mission, a reason that explains everything. So when life feels ordinary or unclear or slow, you assume you're missing it. But meaning isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just learning how to care about something again. How to show up for one thing, one day at a time, without needing it to define your whole life. Not having purpose right now doesn't mean you never will. It just means you're still listening. Not knowing your purpose can actually protect you. Because when you feel pressure to decide too early, you end up choosing something just to stop the discomfort. A path that looks good, a goal that sounds impressive, a version of purpose that belongs more to expectations than to you. And then you spend years trying to convince yourself it fits. Being unsure right now means you haven't locked yourself into the wrong story yet. It means you're giving yourself time to notice what feels honest, not just acceptable. Purpose that's chosen out of fear usually feels heavy. Purpose that grows naturally feels lighter even when it's hard. So if you're in the in-between, don't rush to label it. This pause isn't wasted time, it's you refusing to commit to a life that doesn't feel like yours. Purpose rarely starts as clarity, it starts as curiosity, a small pull towards something you don't fully understand yet, a moment where time passes a little faster than usual, a thought you keep returning to without knowing why, but because it doesn't feel big, you dismiss it. You tell yourself it doesn't count, that it's not serious enough, that it won't lead anywhere. So you wait for certainty instead of following interest, and the waiting feels like emptiness, but purpose isn't found by deciding your whole life at once. It's found by paying attention to what makes you feel slightly more alive than before. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need a calling. You just need one small thing that feels honest enough to try. Purpose grows from movement, not answers. Comparing your life to other people's purpose is what makes the emptiness heavier. You see people who seem sure, driven, certain, and you assume they know something you don't. But what you're seeing is confidence, not certainty. Most people choose a direction and grow into it later. They don't start with clarity. So when you compare their path to your uncertainty, you're not being fair to yourself. You're measuring your beginning against someone else's middle. Purpose isn't a race. It's not something you fall behind on. It shows up at different times for different people because it's shaped by experience, not pressure. The more you stop watching where everyone else is going, the easier it becomes to notice what's quietly calling you, and that's where purpose actually starts to form. It's okay if your purpose isn't impressive. Not everything meaningful looks big from the outside. We're taught that purpose has to be visible. A career, a mission, something people can point to and admire. So when what matters to you feels small, you dismiss it. But simple purpose still counts. Being someone who listens well, being steady when others are overwhelmed, creating small moments of calm, showing up quietly, consistently. Not all purpose is loud. Some of it lives in how you treat people, in how you carry yourself through ordinary days, in how you don't make the world heavier just by being in it. If your life feels purposeless right now, it might be because you're looking for something dramatic and missing what's already there. Purpose doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the way you exist without giving up on yourself. Purpose often becomes clearer after you stop demanding that it explain your whole life. When you're constantly asking, what am I meant to do? Everything feels heavy. Every choice feels permanent, every step feels like a test, but purpose doesn't need to be a full explanation. Sometimes it's just direction, not destiny. When you allow yourself to live without forcing meaning, something softens. You try things without pressure. You follow curiosity without commitment. You let yourself change your mind, and slowly, patterns form. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to show you what feels right and what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive when you corner it. It shows up when you give yourself permission to live without answers for a while. Having no purpose right now doesn't mean your life is empty. It means it's unfinished. You're not meant to know everything yet. You're not behind for feeling unsure. You're not wasting time just because you don't have a clear direction. Some seasons are for building, some are for resting, and some are simply for becoming. Without labels, without answers, this space you're in isn't meaningless. It's where you're learning what matters to you by noticing what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive as a sudden realization. It grows quietly from the way you keep going, even without certainty. So if all you can do right now is exist, try, and stay curious, that's enough. Your life isn't without purpose. It's just still writing it. I don't care how corny it sounds. I'm not going to stop being a lover. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there's no confusion, no wandering attention, no half-interest disguised as effort. Just one person. And a world that feels smaller because of it. I want love where focus doesn't drift, where nobody else even registers, where loving them feels instinctive, not forced. The kind of love that doesn't try to be cinematic, it just is. Two people driving with no destination, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around pretending that kind of love doesn't matter. Like love is casual, like attachment is embarrassing, like caring deeply is something you should hide, because love is everything. It's sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, reading their moods, knowing them in ways no one else does. It's going from stranger to someone you can't imagine life without. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the scars, I'll take the ache that comes with caring. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply, it's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is weak, like wanting someone fully is desperate. They call it being nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to pretend I wouldn't be devastated if I lost someone I truly cared about. I want to feel it, all of it. I want the kind of love where my heart is completely in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah. That makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered. Because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say, I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because it's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd still rather feel everything than live a life that feels hollow. You already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back. And still, you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection. You're chasing connection. The kind that makes ordinary moments feel alive. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. And once you've felt even a glimpse of that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway. You're not asking for perfection, you're asking for presence, for a love that feels mutual, chosen, clear. And wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. So, no, the lover boy in you isn't dying, he's just waiting. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. What people don't realize is how much strength it takes to stay soft in a world that rewards detachment. It's easier to act unbothered, easier to keep things light, easier to pretend you don't care that much, but you were never built that way. You don't love halfway, you don't feel quietly. When you care, it shows in your effort, in your loyalty, and how present you are. And that's exactly what people try to shame out of you. They tell you you're too much, too attached, too intense. Like love is something you're supposed to ration. So sometimes you wonder if you should change, if caring less would protect you, if closing off would finally make things easier. But every time you try, it feels wrong, because pretending not to care cost you more than heartbreak ever did. You don't want to love where you're constantly monitoring yourself, where you have to downplay your feelings to seem cool. You want to love where effort isn't embarrassing, where loyalty isn't laughed at, where wanting someone fully isn't treated like a flaw. And yes, that kind of love is rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because not everyone has the capacity for it. Some people love with caution, some love with conditions, some love with one foot out the door. You love with your whole chest, and that means when it ends, it hurts differently. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already pictured, the version of yourself that only existed with them. But even after that pain, you don't harden, you don't turn cold, you don't become bitter, you grieve, and then you stay open. Not because you're naive, but because you understand something others don't. Love isn't dangerous, avoidance is. A life spent protecting yourself from ever being hurt is a life spent never being fully alive. So you keep choosing love, even when it costs you, even when it scares you. Because being a lover was never about guarantees, it was about courage. And no matter how many times the world tells you to be smaller, to care less, to guard your heart, you don't. Because the lover boy in you knows one truth: a heart that can love deeply is never something to be ashamed of. People who love like you often feel out of place, not because there's something wrong with them, but because the world isn't built for hearts that don't know how to love halfway. You walk into spaces where everyone is guarding themselves, where effort is calculated, where caring too much is treated like a mistake you should have learned from by now. And you can feel it, the hesitation, the emotional distance, the way people keep one foot out the door just in case. Meanwhile, you're standing there ready to choose someone fully if they'd just meet you halfway. That contrast can feel isolating. You start wondering if you're outdated, if your way of loving belongs to another time, another kind of world, because it feels like everyone else is playing it safe while you're still willing to risk your heart, and that makes you stand out. Not loudly, but deeply. You don't bond casually, you don't talk just to fill silence. When you connect, you notice things others miss, you remember details people forget, you show up in ways that don't disappear easily, and that kind of presence can be uncomfortable for people who aren't ready to be seen that closely. So they pull back, they joke about you caring too much, they call your intensity a lot, not because it is, but because they don't know how to match it. That's the part that hurts, realizing you're not too much, you're just too deep for people who only know how to skim the surface. You don't want love that feels convenient, you want love that feels intentional. You don't want someone who chooses you when it's easy. You want someone who chooses you because they mean it. And yeah, that narrows the field. It means you'll feel alone sometimes. It means you'll walk away more than you stay. It means you won't fit everywhere. But fitting everywhere was never the goal. The longing was. The lover boy in you isn't broken because he doesn't blend in. He just hasn't found the place where his kind of love is spoken fluently. And when he does, it won't feel like standing out anymore. It'll feel like coming home. Loving this deeply almost always comes with loneliness first. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because alignment takes time. When you love with your whole heart, you don't rush into anything just to feel chosen. You don't settle for attention that fades. You don't accept half presence just to avoid being alone. And that means there are stretches where it feels like everyone else has someone and you don't. You watch people pair up quickly, jump from connection to connection, call it love because it fills the space, and sometimes you wonder if you're being too patient, too selective, too unwilling to compromise. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not afraid of being alone. You're afraid of being half-loved. You don't want a relationship that feels like constant self-editing, where you have to mute your feelings, where your intensity is treated like a problem instead of a gift. So you wait, not passively, intentionally. You keep your heart open, but your standards intact. And that's the lonely part no one talks about. Choosing alignment over company, choosing depth over distraction, choosing to sit with the emptiness rather than fill it with something that won't last. Some nights it feels heavy. You question whether it's worth it, whether anyone will ever meet you at the level you're willing to love. But then you remember something important. The love you want can't be rushed. It needs two people who aren't scared of closeness, who don't joke about vulnerability, who don't treat commitment like a trap. And until that shows up, being alone is still safer than shrinking yourself. The lover boy in you isn't lonely because he's lacking. He's lonely because he's waiting for something real. And real love doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives aligned. The lover boy gets misunderstood a lot. People look at the way you love and assume it comes from neediness, from insecurity, from not knowing how to be alone. But that's never been true. You don't love deeply because you're afraid of being by yourself. You love deeply because you know how to be alone and still choose connection. There's a difference. You're not reaching for someone to fill a void. You're reaching because you want to share a life you already know how to carry on your own. But in a world obsessed with detachment, depth gets mislabeled, caring becomes too much, consistency becomes clingy, wanting clarity becomes pressure, so people tell you to chill, to play it cool, to act like you don't care as much as you do. And for a while you try. You soften your words, you hold back your feelings, you pretend you're less invested than your heart actually is. But it never feels right. Because loving quietly when you feel loudly starts to feel like lying to yourself. You don't want to be mysterious. You don't want to be distant. You don't want to be someone who treats love like a game of leverage. You want honesty. You want effort that isn't embarrassing. Commitment that isn't mocked. Connection that doesn't require you to minimize who you are. And the truth is, people who can't handle that were never going to meet you where you stand anyway. They confuse emotional availability with weakness because they've never felt safe enough to offer it themselves. So they pull away, they joke, they keep things light, not because you're too much, but because your depth asks them to be real. And not everyone is ready for that. The lover boy isn't misunderstood because he loves wrong. He's misunderstood because he loves honestly in a world that prefers control. And one day, someone won't ask you to tone it down. They won't call your care extra. They won't flinch at your intensity. They'll recognize it because they've been looking for someone who loves like you, without fear, without games, without holding back. One thing people get wrong about you is thinking you lose yourself in love, that you disappear, that you abandon who you are, just keep someone close. But that's not what loving deeply means to you. You don't give your heart away blindly. You give it intentionally. You're aware of the risk. You feel the fear. You know exactly how much it can hurt, and you still choose to love, not because you don't value yourself, but because you refuse to live guarded out of fear. There's a difference between protecting your heart and closing it. Closing it is pretending you don't care. Protecting it is knowing when to walk away without turning cold. And that's something you had to learn the hard way. You've loved people who couldn't meet you emotionally, who enjoyed your warmth but never offered shelter in return. And each time you didn't lose your softness, you refined it. You learned to notice effort, to listen to consistency, to believe actions more than potential. You learned that loving deeply doesn't mean tolerating confusion. It doesn't mean waiting forever. It doesn't mean accepting less than what you give. So now you love with boundaries, not walls, boundaries. You stay open, but you don't stay where you feel unseen. You express yourself, but you don't beg to be understood. You give fully, but only where there's room for you. That's growth. The lover boy in you didn't harden, he matured. He learned that protecting his heart doesn't mean dimming his light. It means choosing spaces where that light is welcomed. And that's why, when you love again, it won't consume you. It'll expand you, because this time you won't confuse intensity with imbalance. You'll recognize the difference between passion and peace. At some point, you stop mistaking chaos for passion. You stop thinking intensity means confusion. You stop believing love has to feel unstable to feel real. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes after loving people who kept you guessing, after giving effort that wasn't matched, after realizing how tired you were from loving alone in a two-person connection. Because for a long time, you thought love was supposed to feel urgent, heavy, like something you had to fight for. But real reciprocity feels different. It doesn't spike your anxiety. It doesn't make you question your place. It doesn't leave you replaying conversations or wondering if you asked for too much. Mutual love feels calm, not boring, steady. It feels like someone meeting your effort without keeping score, like someone choosing you without needing to be convinced. And at first, that kind of love almost feels unfamiliar, because you're used to proving yourself, used to earning attention, used to being the one who cares more. So when someone shows up consistently, communicates clearly, and doesn't flinch at your depth, your body has to unlearn the chaos. You have to remind yourself that peace doesn't mean lack of passion. It means safety. You don't feel smaller around them. You don't feel like you're too much. You don't feel like you need to dim anything. Your intensity doesn't scare them. It reassures them. And that's when it clicks. Love was never supposed to feel like survival. It was supposed to feel like partnership. The lover boy doesn't stop loving deeply. He just stops loving unevenly. He stops pouring into places that don't pour back. He stops calling inconsistency timing, stops calling confusion chemistry, stops calling bare minimum effort, because once you've tasted reciprocity, you can't go back. You can't unfeel what it's like to be met where you stand. And that's when loving deeply finally feels light. Loving deeply doesn't disappear. It just becomes selective. After everything you've felt, everything you've learned, you don't stop wanting connection. You stop giving it away too easily. You don't rush anymore, not because you're guarded, but because you understand your capacity. You know how much you give, how present you are, how deeply you attach, and you're careful about where that kind of love lands. That doesn't mean you're closed off. It means you're intentional. You don't entertain mixed signals. You don't romanticize inconsistency. You don't chase potential while ignoring reality. You pay attention now to effort, to follow through, to how someone shows up when things are calm, not just when things are exciting. Because you've learned that real love isn't proven in intensity alone. It's proven in consistency, and the people who are right for you won't be intimidated by that. They won't feel pressured by your depth. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't need you to shrink to make them comfortable. They'll respect the way you love because they love the same way. That's the shift. You're not asking for more than before. You're just no longer accepting less. You still want closeness, still want loyalty, still want that kind of connection where the world feels quieter because someone chose you fully. But now you're patient with people, not with uncertainty. You're open to love, not to confusion. And that's how the lover boy grows. Not into someone colder, but into someone clearer. Someone who knows that loving deeply isn't about giving your heart to everyone who shows interest. It's about giving it to someone who knows how to hold it. Before the right love shows up, the lover boy is usually alone for a while. Not because he can't find connection, but because he refuses to force it. He's learned what happens when you fill space just to avoid loneliness, how quickly comfort turns into compromise, how easy it is to lose yourself when you accept something that doesn't fully meet you. So he chooses solitude instead, and solitude teaches him things love never could. It shows him who he is without anyone else's expectations, without adjusting his emotions, without holding back his intensity to make someone stay. He learns how to sit with himself, how to enjoy quiet, how to be fulfilled without external validation. And that's important, because when you know how to be alone, you stop accepting love that feels like abandonment in disguise. During this time, he doesn't become detached, he becomes clear about what drains him, clear about what feels safe, clear about the kind of love that actually aligns with who he is. He stops craving attention, stops mistaking chemistry for compatibility, stops confusing being wanted with being understood. And yes, some days are heavy. He still wants connection, still imagines sharing moments with someone, still feels that pull toward closeness. But the difference now is that he won't trade his peace for proximity. He knows the right love won't require him to chase, won't ask him to question his worth, won't make him feel like he has to earn care. So he waits, not anxiously, not desperately, but confidently, because he understands something now. Being alone isn't a punishment. It's preparation. It's a space where he becomes exactly the version of himself the right love will recognize immediately. And when that love finally arrives, it won't feel like relief. It'll feel familiar. The lover boy was never naive. He knew what love could cost him. He knew how deeply it could hurt. He knew it could break him, leave marks he'd carry for years, and he chose it anyway. Not because he didn't understand the risk, but because a life without love felt smaller than a life with scars. For a long time, he thought loving this way was a flaw, something he'd eventually outgrow, something pain was supposed to cure, but it never did. Every heartbreak slowed him down, made him more careful, more aware, but it never killed that part of him that wanted connection, because loving it deeply was never a phase. It was part of his design. He wasn't meant to love casually. He wasn't built for half interest or emotional distance. He was built to choose one person and mean it. That's why it hurt more. That's why waiting felt heavier. That's why walking away took courage. But all of it shaped him. It taught him boundaries without bitterness, standards without arrogance, patience without self-abandonment. So now, when he looks back, he doesn't regret loving the way he did. He doesn't regret caring too much. He doesn't regret believing. He doesn't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet him in that same place. They won't flinch at his intensity. They won't joke about his softness. They won't treat his loyalty like it's replaceable. They'll recognize it. And when that happens, everything will feel different. No anxiety, no confusion, no wondering where he stands, just clarity, effort that feels mutual, love that feels chosen, connection that doesn't require him to dim anything, and suddenly all the waiting makes sense. Not because it was easy, Diaz, but because it protected him from settling for less than he was capable of giving. So no, the lover boy doesn't die, he doesn't disappear, he doesn't harden into someone unrecognizable. He just learns who deserves him, and when the right love finally arrives, he won't have to prove anything. He'll simply be met, and that's all he ever wanted. Leave her alone, bro. Not because you stopped caring, but because you cared longer than you should have. You gave her chances when she gave you confusion. You gave her patience when she gave you mixed signals. You showed up consistently while she showed up only when it was convenient. And the hardest part to admit isn't that she didn't choose you, it's that you kept choosing her even when she made it clear you weren't a priority. You stayed solid. You stayed available. You stayed hoping one day she'd wake up and finally see you the way you saw her, hoping one day she'd match your effort, your energy, your care, but she didn't. Not because you weren't enough, but because she was comfortable. She liked knowing you were there. She liked the attention, the validation, the way you made her feel wanted, but she never wanted to give that same certainty back. You weren't her first choice. You were her safety net, her backup plan, her just in case. And staying in that position slowly destroys you. You start questioning yourself, start wondering if you're asking for too much, start lowering your standards just to keep her around. You tell yourself, Maybe she's just busy. Maybe she's scared. Maybe if I'm more patient, she'll change. But deep down, you know the truth. Someone who truly wants you won't make you feel like you're fighting for their attention. They won't leave you guessing where you stand. They won't only show up when it benefits them, so leave her alone, not out of anger, not out of ego, not to prove a point. Leave her alone out of respect for yourself, because the moment you stop texting first, stop checking her stories, stop replaying conversations in your head, stop making excuses for her absence, you'll feel it, that quiet, that peace, and it'll feel unfamiliar at first because you've been living in chaos for so long you forgot what calm feels like. But that peace is real. It's the peace of no longer forcing something that was never meant to be mutual. The peace of choosing yourself after constantly choosing someone who wouldn't choose you back. She had her chance, she saw your heart, she saw your effort, she saw what you were willing to give, and if she didn't value you then, don't give her another opportunity to waste you again, because the right person won't need convincing. And the moment you truly let her go, you make room for someone who won't treat your love like an option. Choose yourself now. Walking away doesn't feel strong at first. It feels like withdrawal, like your chest is empty and heavy at the same time, like you're doing the one thing your heart keeps begging you not to do, because even when someone isn't good for you, your attachment doesn't just shut off. You still think about her when your phone lights up, still wonder if she noticed your silence, still catch yourself hoping she'll reach out just so you can feel chosen one last time. That's the part nobody talks about. Leaving someone you loved feels like betraying your own feelings. You start asking yourself if you gave up too soon, if maybe this time would have been different, if maybe you should have tried just a little harder. But here's the truth you keep avoiding. You already tried harder than she ever did. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. Someone who truly values you won't require you to disappear to be noticed. They won't need distance to realize your worth. They won't only miss you once you finally stop showing up. And yeah, she might notice now. She might text later. She might suddenly act interested once she feels you slipping away. But don't confuse curiosity with commitment. People hate losing access. They hate losing control. They hate realizing the person they took for granted finally chose themselves. That doesn't mean she changed, just means she felt the shift. And if you go back now, you'll teach her the same lesson again, that she can give you the bare minimum and still keep you around. Leaving is not about punishing her, it's about protecting you. It's about choosing sleep over stress, peace over potential, consistency over confusion. You're not cold for walking away, you're not heartless for setting a boundary, you're not weak for needing more than uncertainty, you're human, and you deserve a love that doesn't make you feel like you're slowly disappearing just to keep someone comfortable. Walking away hurts, but staying where you're not valued hurts longer, and one day, when the noise finally fades, you'll realize you didn't lose her. You found yourself again. Leaving her alone doesn't mean the feelings disappear. It means you finally stop letting those feelings control you. Because the hardest part isn't cutting contact. It's sitting with the silence afterward. It's waking up and realizing there's no good morning text to send, no story to check, no excuse to reach out, just to see how she's doing. Your brain will try to trick you. It'll replay the good moments, the laughs, the nights where it felt real. It'll tell you that maybe you imagined the distance, maybe you were asking for too much, maybe if you just explained yourself better she would have stayed, but you already explained yourself through effort, through patience, through showing up when it wasn't convenient. Love doesn't need translation. If she wanted to choose you, she wouldn't have kept you guessing. She wouldn't have made you feel like your presence was optional. She wouldn't have treated your consistency like something she could always come back to later. You weren't confusing. You were clear. She just wasn't committed. And yeah, it hurts realizing that the person you'd fight for wouldn't even fight for clarity with you. That's when you have to stop romanticizing the potential and start respecting the reality. Reality is this: you were giving girlfriend level energy to someone who kept you at arm's length. You were loyal to someone who wasn't sure she wanted you at all. Walking away feels unnatural because you're not used to choosing yourself first. You're used to being patient, understanding, giving people time to figure you out while you slowly lose pieces of yourself in the process. But love isn't supposed to cost you your peace. The moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop explaining, the moment you stop waiting for her to finally get it, you reclaim your power. And that scares people who benefited from you staying small. You didn't lose her. You outgrew the version of yourself that was willing to accept half love, and this is only the beginning. And the truth you don't want to admit yet is that leaving her alone feels like you're losing something. Not because she was right for you, but because she became familiar. You got used to waiting, used to hoping, used to reading into crumbs like they were signs. You trained your nervous system to find comfort in inconsistency. So when you finally step back, your body panics before your mind understands. You'll feel restless. You'll feel tempted to break your own boundary. You'll pick up your phone for no reason, scroll, close the app, open it again, just to see if maybe this time she noticed your you're gone, and that urge doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're detoxing from someone who kept you emotionally hungry. Because when someone keeps you half-fed, you start confusing starvation with love. You tell yourself, maybe she just didn't know how much I cared. Maybe if I stayed a little longer, maybe I gave up too soon. But you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you cared too much to keep abandoning yourself. You stayed long enough to know the pattern, the delayed replies, the empty apologies, the promises that never turned into action. You stayed long enough to realize that if someone wanted to show up for you, you wouldn't have to convince them. And deep down, you know that. That's why the silence hits different now. It's not empty, it's honest. For the first time, you're not waiting for her mood to decide your worth. You're not shrinking yourself to stay chosen. You're not wondering if today's the day she finally treats you right. And yeah, it hurts. Because healing doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels lonely. But loneliness with self-respect will always be quieter than love that keeps you anxious. One day you'll look back and realize leaving her alone was the moment everything started changing. Not because she came back, but because you finally came back to yourself. At some point, you have to ask yourself a hard question. How long are you willing to wait for someone to finally treat you right? Not because they're evil, not because they're a bad person, but because they keep showing you over and over that you're not a priority. And the scary part, you already know the answer. You've known it for a while. You just didn't want to accept it. Because accepting it means admitting that the future you imagined with them was built more on hope than reality. You weren't in love with what was happening. You were in love with what could have happened if they just showed up the way you needed. So you stayed, you waited, you overextended yourself, you gave patience to someone who gave you uncertainty, you gave loyalty to someone who gave you mixed signals, you gave understanding to someone who never tried to understand you, and every time they pulled away, you blamed yourself. Maybe I'm asking for too much, maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe this is just how love is, but love is not confusion. Love is not constantly guessing where you stand. Love is not feeling anxious every time your phone lights up or doesn't. Love doesn't make you feel replaceable. What really kept you stuck wasn't them. It was the version of you that believed walking away meant you failed, but leaving doesn't mean you lost. It means you finally stopped losing yourself, because staying with someone who makes you feel unwanted slowly erodes your confidence in ways you don't notice at first. You stop speaking up. You stop expecting effort. You start accepting bare minimum behavior and calling it maturity. You start shrinking your needs so you don't scare them away, and that's when love stops being love and starts becoming survival. You don't need to be less to be loved. You don't need to be quieter, cooler, easier, more convenient. The right person won't feel overwhelmed by your care. They won't feel annoyed by your presence. They won't treat your love like something disposable. They'll meet you where you are instead of making you feel like you're always asking for too much. And yeah, choosing yourself feels lonely at first because you're breaking a habit. You're breaking the habit of chasing, the habit of waiting, the habit of hoping someone will finally choose you. But peace doesn't arrive loud. It arrives quietly. In the moments you stop checking your phone, stop explaining yourself, stop wondering why you weren't enough, one day you'll realize you don't miss them. You miss who you were before you started doubting your worth, and that version of you, they're still there. You didn't lose love, you protected it. You didn't walk away from something good. You walked away from something that was slowly breaking you. And that's not weakness, that's growth. And what nobody tells you is that once you finally stop chasing them, that's when everything gets quiet. Not empty quiet, honest quiet. No more checking your phone every 5 minutes. No more replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you said the wrong thing. No more anxiety before hitting send. No more hoping today will be the day they suddenly care more. At first it feels uncomfortable because chaos became familiar, confusion felt normal, and peace feels strange when you're not used to it. You might even miss them for the wrong reasons. Not because they treated you well, but because your nervous system got addicted to inconsistency. You got used to highs and lows, to feeling chosen one day and invisible the next, to chasing validation instead of receiving love. That kind of pattern messes with your head. It makes you mistake emotional stress for passion. It makes stability feel boring and uncertainty feel exciting. But real love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't disappear when things get inconvenient. It doesn't require you to earn basic respect. Real love feels safe. Not dull, not dramatic, safe. And when you finally step away, you start noticing things you ignored before. How drained you were, how much energy you poured into someone who barely poured back, how often you made excuses for behavior that hurt you. You start realizing how much love you actually have to give, how deeply you care, how loyal you are when you choose someone. And instead of feeling ashamed of that, you begin to see it as strength, because one day, someone will meet that energy without hesitation. They won't flinch when you care deeply. They won't pull away when things get real. They won't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by being yourself. They'll choose you without you having to beg. They'll show up without being reminded. They'll make you feel wanted without confusion. And when that happens, you'll look back at the version of you who stayed too long, and you won't feel regret. You'll feel proud that you learned, proud that you walked away, proud that you chose peace over potential, because letting go wasn't the end of your story. It was the moment you finally made space for something better. At some point, you have to accept a hard truth. If they wanted to show up, they would have. If they cared the way you cared, you wouldn't be confused. You wouldn't be questioning where you stand. You wouldn't be asking strangers for advice just to understand their silence. Love isn't subtle, effort isn't hidden, interest doesn't need decoding. When someone wants you in their life, they make space, not excuses, not delays, not half responses at midnight when they're bored. And the reason it hurts so much to accept this is because you invested emotionally before you were ever chosen properly. You imagined futures, you pictured moments that never actually happened. You fell in love with potential instead of reality. That's not weakness, that's hope. But hope becomes dangerous when it keeps you stuck, when it convinces you to stay loyal to someone who treats you like an option, when it makes you believe that patience will eventually turn into priority. It won't. People don't suddenly wake up and value you after months of showing you they don't. They don't magically learn how to love you correctly once they realize you'll stay no matter what. If anything, they learn they don't have to try. And that's why walking away feels so heavy, because you're not just letting go of them. You're letting go of the version of the future you created in your head. You're grieving something that never fully existed. That kind of loss is real. You'll miss the idea of them more than the person. You'll miss what you hoped they'd become, not what they actually showed you. And that's okay. Healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't matter. It means being honest about why it did and still choosing yourself anyway. You don't need closure from someone who couldn't communicate. You don't need answers from someone who avoided accountability. Their behavior already told you everything. Silence is an answer. Distance is a decision. Inconsistency is a choice. And once you stop chasing clarity from people who benefit from your confusion, you start reclaiming your power. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving your worth. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort. You realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And when that finally sinks in, you don't become bitter, you become selective. You start protecting your heart the same way you used to give it away. You start choosing peace over chaos, consistency over excitement, respect over attachment. Let them go, not because they're a bad person, but because they weren't your person. And the moment you truly accept that is the moment your life starts opening up in ways you couldn't see before. And the craziest part is, once you stop chasing them, you start noticing how quiet it gets. Not the painful kind of quiet, but the kind where your nervous system finally gets a break. No more checking your phone every 5 minutes. No more rereading old messages trying to find meaning. No more wondering if today will be the day they suddenly choose you. You realize how much energy you were burning just trying to feel secure with someone who never offered stability. That constant anxiety, that wasn't love. That was your intuition fighting against your attachment. Real love doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't make you feel disposable. It doesn't require you to abandon yourself just to stay connected. And yeah, letting go hurts at first. There's withdrawal. There's nights where you want to reach out, where your fingers hover over their name, where you almost convince yourself to send that one last message. But every time you don't, you build a little more self-respect. You start realizing how much of yourself you gave away to someone who never protected your heart the way you protected theirs. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were asking for effort. You were asking to matter. And one day someone will meet you where you are without you having to beg, explain, or wait. They won't make you feel like you're too much. They won't make you feel like you're replaceable. They won't make you question your value in moments of silence. But you don't get to that person if you keep clinging to the ones who treat you like an option. So let this be the moment you choose differently. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Because the version of you that keeps chasing people who don't choose you deserves rest. And the version of you that finally walks away is the one that makes room for something real. A lot of people don't talk about how hard it is to walk away from someone you still care about, not because you don't see the red flags, but because you remember the good moments too clearly. You remember who they were in the beginning, the version of them that felt safe, the version that made you feel wanted, chosen, important, and you keep hoping that version will come back. That's what keeps you stuck. Not love, hope that if you wait a little longer, if you explain yourself yourself one more time. If you give just a bit more patience, they'll finally show up the way you need them to. But hope can be dangerous when it's attached to someone who keeps proving they're not willing or ready to meet you halfway. Because every time you ignore their actions and listen to their potential instead, you teach yourself that your needs are negotiable. You start accepting inconsistency as normal, mixed signals as effort, bare minimum as love, and slowly, you stop recognizing yourself. You become quieter, more anxious, more forgiving than you should be. You start blaming yourself for their lack of effort. Maybe I asked for too much. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just how relationships are. But deep down, you know the truth. Love isn't supposed to feel like constant confusion. It isn't supposed to drain you more than it fills you. And it definitely isn't supposed to make you feel alone while you're still technically with someone. That's when you have to be honest with yourself. Not about how much you love them, but about how much staying is costing you. Because loving someone shouldn't mean losing yourself in the process. And what hurts the most is realizing that you were willing to do the hard things for someone who wouldn't even do the simple ones. You showed consistency, they showed convenience, you communicated your feelings, they avoided uncomfortable conversations, you stayed when things got messy, they pulled away the moment effort was required, and yet you still questioned yourself, you still wondered if you were the problem, if you were asking for too much, if you were expecting love the wrong way. But love isn't complicated like that. People make time for what matters to them. They protect what they value. They don't leave you guessing where you stand. The truth is, some people don't lose you because they don't care. They lose you because they never learned how to care properly. They want connection without responsibility, attention without commitment, love without effort. And you can't teach someone how to show up if they don't want to. That's why leaving isn't weakness, it's self-respect finally getting louder than attachment. It's choosing peace over potential, reality over hope, self-worth over familiar pain. Walking away doesn't mean what you felt wasn't real. It means you finally decided that you are real too. And one day you'll look back and realize that the moment you stopped chasing was the moment your life got quieter, lighter, clearer. Because the right person won't make you feel like love is something you have to earn. They'll choose you without being convinced. You stayed longer than you should have because you believed in what could be, not what actually was. You kept replaying the good moments, convincing yourself they meant more than the silence, the distance, the excuses. You ignored the way your chest felt heavy every time you waited for a reply. You ignored how drained you felt after giving everything and receiving the bare minimum. That wasn't love making you tired. That was imbalance. Real love doesn't leave you anxious. It doesn't make you feel disposable. It doesn't turn your patience into pain. And the hardest truth to accept is that some people are comfortable letting you overextend as long as it benefits them. They don't stop you. They don't reassure you. They just take until one day you finally stop giving. And when you do, they feel it. Not because they miss you, but because they miss the access. That's when they reach out. That's when they suddenly care. That's when confusion turns into regret. But by then, you've already changed. You're no longer begging to be chosen. You're no longer shrinking to fit someone else's emotional limits. You're choosing yourself the way you always wished they would choose you. And that choice, that's where your healing actually starts. At some point, you stop missing them and start missing who you were before you questioned your worth for them, before you reread messages trying to find meaning that wasn't there, before you blamed yourself for someone else's lack of effort. That's when it really hits you. You didn't lose them. You lost yourself trying to keep them. You became quieter. You thought twice before speaking. You downplayed your needs so you wouldn't seem like too much. And the crazy part is they never asked you to do that. You did it because you cared. You did it because you were afraid that being fully you would push them away. But love that only survives when you make yourself smaller was never meant to last. Real love doesn't need you to perform. It doesn't need you to chase. It doesn't make you feel replaceable the moment you stop overgiving. And once you understand that, you stop romanticizing the bare minimum. You stop calling inconsistency mystery. You stop calling neglect space. You stop calling emotional distance busy. You see it for what it really was. Someone enjoying your presence without respecting your heart. That realization hurts, but it also frees you, because now you know you're not asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And the next time someone comes along, you won't beg them to stay. You'll watch how they show up. You'll notice how they choose you without being asked. And if they don't, you'll walk away sooner. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. And there comes a point where the pain shifts. It's no longer about missing them. It's about realizing how much of yourself you gave away just to keep them comfortable. You start remembering moments where you stayed quiet even though something hurt. Moments where you said, it's fine, when it really wasn't. Moments where you lowered your standards because you didn't want to seem demanding. You replay conversations in your head and notice how often you explained yourself, how often you justified their behavior, how often you made excuses for why they couldn't show up the way you needed, and that's when it finally clicks. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person to do what they were never willing to do. You weren't needy. You were neglected. You weren't overthinking. You were being given mixed signals. You weren't insecure. You were emotionally starved. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You realize how exhausting it was to love someone who only showed up halfway, how draining it was to constantly wonder where you stood with them, how heavy it felt to care more than you were cared for. That kind of love doesn't make you feel safe. It keeps you anxious. It keeps you waiting. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of hoping they'll change while slowly losing yourself. And the saddest part, they benefited from your patience, from your loyalty, from your willingness to stay even when it hurt. You don't get rewarded for suffering in silence. You don't get love by proving how much pain you can tolerate. Love is supposed to feel steady. It's supposed to feel mutual. It's supposed to feel like effort is being met with effort, not excuses. So choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's deciding that you won't keep pouring into someone who leaves you empty. It's realizing that peace feels better than chasing potential that never becomes real. And when you finally choose yourself, you don't become cold. You become clear. Clear about what you deserve. Clear about what you won't accept again. Clear about the fact that the right person won't make you question your value in the first place. After you choose yourself, something strange happens. The noise quiets down. Your phone feels lighter. Chest doesn't feel so tight all the time. You stop waking up with that anxious feeling, wondering if today will be the day they finally show up for you or disappoint you again. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes, stop rereading old messages, stop trying to decode tone, timing, silence, because you finally understand that love was never supposed to feel like a puzzle, and that's when you realize how much energy you were wasting on someone who was unsure about you while you were sure about them. You were loving from a place of hope. They were loving from a place of convenience. You wanted depth. They wanted access. You wanted consistency. They wanted control without responsibility. And once you step back, you see how one-sided it really was. You notice how you were always the one adjusting, always the one compromising, always the one reaching out first, always the one trying to keep things alive. That's not love, that's survival mode. Real love doesn't make you feel disposable, doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just for wanting basic respect. And here's the hardest truth to accept. Potential means nothing without effort. You weren't in love with who they were. You were in love with who they could be, the version of them that only existed in your head. But you can't build a future with someone's maybe. You can't heal by holding on to what ifs. So you stop romanticizing the bare minimum. You stop giving credit for intentions that never turn into action. And slowly, your standards rise back up to where they were always meant to be. You start asking better questions. You start walking away sooner. You stop explaining your worth to people who never planned to value it. And the craziest part, the moment you stop settling, you realize how much you were settling before. You realize you don't miss them. You miss the version of yourself that believed love had to hurt to be real, but it doesn't. Love can be calm. Love can be safe. Love can feel like rest instead of stress. And once you experience that, you'll never beg for confusion again. Leaving her alone doesn't mean you stop caring overnight. Doesn't mean you suddenly forget her laugh, her voice, the way she made things feel alive for a moment. It means you finally accept the truth you've been avoiding. That love without reciprocity will slowly drain you until there's nothing left. You were pouring into someone who never learned how to pour back. And no matter how patient you were, no matter how consistent you stayed, you can't teach someone to value you if they don't want to. You kept telling yourself, maybe she's just going through something. You made excuses for the missed calls, the late replies, the emotional distance. You told yourself love was supposed to be patient, that real men stay, that walking away meant you didn't try hard enough. But here's the part nobody talks about. There's a difference between being patient and being neglected. There's a difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. And you cross that line without even realizing it. Every time you texted first, every time you ignored your own gut, every time you accepted the bare minimum just to keep her close, you taught yourself that your needs came second. You shrank yourself to fit into a space she barely made room for. And that does something to you. It makes you question your worth. It makes you wonder why loving someone feels like punishment. It makes you think something is wrong with you. And the truth is, you were just loving the wrong person. Leaving her alone is the first time you choose yourself. It's the first time you stop begging for effort and start demanding peace. It's realizing that love isn't supposed to feel like anxiety, confusion, or constant doubt. The right person won't make you question where you stand. They won't make you compete with silence. They won't make you feel disposable. You don't need closure from her. You don't need one last conversation. Her actions already told you everything you needed to know. And as hard as it is, walking away now is what protects the part of you that still believes in real love. Part of you that deserves consistency, reassurance, and effort without having to ask. This isn't about her anymore. It's about you learning that choosing peace is not weakness, it's growth. What hurts the most isn't even losing her. It's realizing how long you stayed when your heart was begging you to leave. It's remembering all the moments you felt small but ignored it because loving her felt bigger than loving yourself. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you hoped, because you saw potential, because you believed that if you loved hard enough, showed up enough, proved yourself enough, things would change. But love doesn't work like that. You can't love someone into choosing you. You can't be consistent enough to make someone consistent back. You can't sacrifice your peace forever and call it love. At some point, staying becomes more painful than leaving, and that's where you are now. You're gonna have nights where you almost text her, nights where your fingers hover over her name, where your mind starts replaying the good memories and conveniently forgets the pain. You'll miss the comfort of what was familiar, even if it wasn't healthy. That doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're human. Healing doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop going back. And slowly, without even realizing it, things will start to change. You'll wake up one day and notice your chest doesn't feel as heavy. You won't check your phone as much. Her name won't be the first thing on your mind when something good or bad happens. You'll start laughing again, not forced, not distracted, but real. You'll start feeling like yourself again. That's when you'll understand why it had to end. Not because she was evil, not because you were unlovable, but because she wasn't capable of meeting you where you stood. And staying would have cost you parts of yourself you can't afford to lose. One day, someone will choose you without hesitation, without confusion, without making you question your worth. And when that happens, you'll look back and realize leaving her alone was the moment your life finally started loving forward. And listen, there's something nobody really prepares you for after you finally walk away. The quiet, not the peaceful kind at first, the kind where there's no chaos, no waiting on replies, no wondering if today will be the day she finally shows up the way you need her to. That silence can feel uncomfortable because you got used to emotional noise, you got used to the highs and lows, the hope, the disappointment, the cycle, and when it's gone, your mind almost panics like it lost something important. But what it really lost was the stress. You're going to question yourself. You'll wonder if you were too harsh, too impatient, too emotional. You'll replay conversations and think, maybe I should have said this differently. Maybe I should have tried one more time. But understand this. If someone truly wanted to stay, they wouldn't have made you feel like you had to beg for effort. You wouldn't have had to over-explain your feelings. You wouldn't have felt like loving them was a constant uphill battle. The version of you that stayed too long did so because he believed in love. And that's not something to be ashamed of, but the version of you now, he's learning discernment. He's learning that love without respect will drain you. That potential means nothing without action. And that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. You didn't lose her. You released someone who was blocking the path to someone better, someone who won't confuse consistency with boredom, someone who won't make you feel like an option, someone who won't need reminders of your worth. Right now, it might feel like you're walking alone, but you're not going backwards anymore, and that's everything. And one day, without even realizing it, you're gonna wake up, and she won't be the first thought on your mind anymore. Not because you stopped caring overnight, not because what you felt wasn't real, but because you finally gave yourself permission to move forward. The memories won't disappear, but they won't control you either. They'll just be reminders of what you survived, not what you're missing. You'll start to notice how much lighter you feel, how your chest isn't tight every time your phone buzzes, how you're not constantly checking stories, rereading old messages, or wondering why you weren't enough for someone who never knew how to love you properly in the first place. You'll realize how much of yourself you were giving away to someone who kept taking without ever pouring back into you, and that's when it hits you. The problem was never your effort. It was never your heart being too big. It was never you loving too deeply. The problem was that you were offering loyalty to someone who didn't know how to value it. You were offering consistency to someone addicted to convenience. and you were offering real love to someone who only liked the idea of being loved. Walking away wasn't a loss, it was a correction, a reset, a moment where you finally chose peace over potential, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over attachment. That takes strength most people don't have. So don't go back. Not when she gets lonely, not when she suddenly remembers your value, not when she realizes nobody else loved her the way you did, because by then you'll understand something important. Someone who truly wants you won't need to lose you to see your worth. Leave her alone, and finally let yourself be found by someone who won't ever make you question if you matter. I don't think I ever wanted too much. I didn't need perfection. I didn't need constant attention. I didn't need someone to save me. I just wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone who noticed when I went quiet, someone who checked in without being asked, someone who didn't treat my presence like something optional. But every time I tried to explain that, it sounded like neediness, like I was asking for too much. So I stayed quiet. I accepted less. I told myself I was independent enough to not need reassurance, but deep down that wasn't true. I wasn't asking to be obsessed over. I wasn't asking to be put on a pedestal. I was asking to matter, to feel like my absence would be noticed, like my feelings would be considered, like I didn't have to earn basic care by being easy, understanding, or low maintenance. And every time I didn't get that, I told myself it was fine, that this is just how people are, that expecting care is unrealistic, that I should be grateful for whatever effort showed up, but wanting to be cared for doesn't make you weak. It means you're human. It means you want a connection where effort is mutual and presence isn't forced. And the hardest part is realizing how long you stayed in places where you felt invisible just because you didn't want to seem like you needed too much. I didn't want someone to fix me. I just wanted someone who cared enough to stay aware of me. At some point, wanting to be cared for turns into accepting the bare minimum. You stop asking questions, stop expressing needs, stop pointing out what hurts, because every time you do, it feels like you're asking for too much. So you adjust, you get excited over replies that should be normal, you appreciate effort that should be consistent, you thank people for things they do effortlessly if they truly cared, and you tell yourself this is just how love works. But deep down you feel it, the imbalance, the quiet disappointment, the way you're always the one paying attention. You're not asking for grand gestures, you're asking for awareness, to be checked on, to be considered, to feel like your emotions aren't an inconvenience, but instead you keep shrinking your expectations to fit what people are willing to give. You call it being low maintenance, being understanding, being independent, when really you're just afraid that if you ask for more, you'll lose what little you have. And that's the part that hurts, because you don't want more love, you just want the love that's already there to show up consistently. You don't want to beg for care, you want it to be natural. And the longer you settle, the more you start questioning yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I needy? Am I wrong for wanting this? But wanting to be cared for was never the problem. Staying where you're barely noticed is. Pretending you don't need care slowly disconnects you from yourself. You start ignoring your own feelings before anyone else can. You tell yourself you're fine even when you're not. You swallow disappointment and call it maturity, because admitting you want care feels risky. It feels like giving someone power to decide whether you're too much, so you choose silence instead. You become the easy one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't ask for reassurance or consistency or emotional presence. And people like that version of you, because it asks for nothing, but inside something starts to dull. You feel lonely even when you're not alone. You feel unseen even when someone's there. You start questioning whether your needs are even valid anymore. That's when you know you've gone too far. Not by wanting care, but by convincing yourself you don't deserve it. You weren't meant to love people from a distance. You weren't meant to be strong at the cost of being felt. Care isn't weakness. Wanting it isn't dependency. It's connection. And the moment you deny yourself that truth, you don't just lose it from others, you lose it from yourself. There's a moment where it finally hits you. You've been caring for everyone else while no one was really caring for you. You remember how often you checked in, how often you noticed shifts in tone, how often you adjusted yourself to make things easier for others, and then you look back and realize how rarely anyone did that for you. No one asked if you were okay when you went quiet. No one noticed when your energy changed. No one slowed down enough to really see you. And that realization hurts in a quiet, heavy way because you weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking to be prioritized above everything. You were asking for reciprocity. To feel like your presence mattered as much as you made theirs matter. That's when the exhaustion sets in. Not physical tiredness, emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from always being the one who cares first, who understands more, who gives grace even when it costs you. You start wondering how you became so good at holding space for people who never learned how to hold it for you. And the truth is uncomfortable. You taught them it was okay to lean on you without leaning back, to receive care without returning it, not because you wanted imbalance, but because you didn't want to feel abandoned. And realizing that is both painful and clarifying because it shows you something important. You weren't asking for too much, you were just asking it from the wrong people. That realization changes how you choose people. You stop being impressed by words. You stop getting attached to potential. You stop mistaking attention for care because now you know the difference. Care looks like consistency. It looks like remembering. It looks like showing up even when it's not convenient. So you start paying attention to who checks in without being prompted, who notices when you're off, who doesn't make you explain why you need what you need. And at first that makes your circle smaller. You walk away from people you once would have stayed for. You stop overextending. You stop being the only one holding things together. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally care about yourself too. You don't chase care now. You don't hint at it. You don't downplay your needs to make someone comfortable. You let people show you how they show up. And if they don't, you don't argue with it. You don't try to teach them how to care. You accept the information and move accordingly because wanting to be cared for isn't a flaw, it's a boundary. And the moment you start honoring it, you realize something important. You'd rather be alone than be surrounded and still feel unseen. Choosing yourself feels lonely at first, not because you made the wrong choice, but because you stopped filling the silence with people who never really saw you. You notice the absence quickly, the lack of constant conversation, the quiet that comes when you're no longer overgiving just to stay connected, and that quiet can be uncomfortable because for a long time, being needed made you feel valued. Being available made you feel important. Being the one who cared most made you feel like you belonged. Now you don't do that anymore. You don't reach out first every time. You don't check in when it's never returned. You don't hold space for people who won't hold it for you. And yes, that leaves gaps, but those gaps feel different than the loneliness you had before. Before you were lonely even when surrounded by people. Now you're alone but at peace. There's no resentment building, no quiet disappointment, no wondering why you're not enough. Just space to breathe, space to feel what you feel, space to rebuild a relationship with yourself that isn't based on neglect. You start realizing that loneliness with self-respect is lighter than connection without care. And once you taste that peace, it's hard to go back because you finally understand. Being cared for starts with not abandoning yourself anymore. Learning how to receive care is harder than giving it. That part surprised me. I was always good at showing up, at checking in, at being thoughtful without being asked. But when someone tried to do that for me, I didn't know how to relax into it. I questioned it. I downplayed it. I felt uncomfortable being the one who was noticed because for so long, care felt conditional, like something you earned by being useful, easy, understanding. So when someone offers it freely, without you proving anything, your first instinct is to brace yourself. You wait for it to disappear, you look for the catch, you assume it won't last, and that's not because you don't want care, it's because you're not used to it being consistent. You're used to being the giver, the supporter, the one who adapts. So receiving feels vulnerable in a way giving never did. It means letting someone see you without performing, letting yourself need without apologizing, letting care exist without questioning your worthiness of it. That takes unlearning. It takes time to believe that you don't have to exhaust yourself to deserve tenderness. And I'm still learning that, still reminding myself that care doesn't have to be chased, earned, or negotiated. Sometimes it's just there, and allowing it in is the bravest thing you can do after spending so long surviving without it. At some point, you stop asking why people don't care. You stop replaying conversations, stop analyzing tone, stop wondering what you could have done differently, because that question only keeps you stuck chasing explanations instead of truth. So you ask a different question: who actually shows up for me? Not who says they care, not who means well, not who shows interest when it's easy, but who checks in consistently, who notices when you're quiet, who doesn't disappear when you need space or reassurance or time. And the answer is usually smaller than you expect: fewer people, less noise, more clarity. That realization hurts, but it also simplifies everything. You stop pouring into people who only take. You stop investing in connections that leave you feeling unseen. You don't make announcements, you don't explain your shift, you just move differently. You protect your energy. You reserve your care for those who return it naturally. And slowly you stop feeling desperate to be noticed, because you're no longer surrounding yourself with people who make you feel invisible. Care stops being something you beg for and starts being something you recognize. And that's when you finally understand being cared for isn't about convincing people to treat you better. It's about choosing the ones who already do. Wanting to be cared for doesn't make you needy. It makes you honest. Needy is asking someone to fill a void they didn't create. Needy is expecting one person to carry everything for you. But wanting care, that's wanting reciprocity. That's wanting your effort to be met, your presence to be valued, your emotions to be considered. You're not asking someone to revolve their life around you. You're asking them to see you. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that asking for that was too much. So you minimized yourself. You softened your needs. You told yourself independence meant not needing anything from anyone. But that wasn't strength. That was self-denial, because even the strongest people need to feel cared for sometimes, need to feel noticed, need to feel like their existence matters to someone else. You don't want care because you can't survive without it. You want it because connection is part of being human. And the moment you stop shaming yourself for wanting that, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop pretending you're okay with being overlooked. You stop accepting crumbs just to feel included. You realize something important. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong people. At the end of all this, I realized something simple. Wanting to be cared for is not something I negotiate anymore. I'm done explaining why it matters, done justifying why I feel hurt, done shrinking my needs so someone else can stay comfortable. Care is not a bonus, it's not extra, it's not something you earn by being quiet, easy, or low maintenance. It's the baseline. If someone doesn't notice me, doesn't check in, doesn't consider how their actions affect me, then they don't get access to me. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, out of self-respect. I spent too long convincing myself that wanting care made me weak, too long accepting half presence and calling it connection, too long staying where I felt invisible, just to avoid being alone. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need to be chased. I don't need to be obsessed over. I just need to be considered. And if someone can't do that naturally, without me begging, hinting, or explaining, then they're not my person. because the right people won't make you feel guilty for wanting to matter. They won't make care feel conditional. They won't make you question whether you're asking for too much. They'll just show up. And until that happens, I'd rather stand alone with my needs intact than sit beside someone who makes me feel unseen. I didn't want too much. I just wanted to be cared for. And now I care enough about myself to never accept less again. Maybe I'm not hard to love. Maybe I'm just not someone people stay for. Because they come close, they get attached, they say they care, they act invested, and then something shifts, they pull back, they get unsure, they choose easier. And after it happens enough times, you stop blaming timing, you start blaming yourself. You start wondering if you're good for the moment, but not for the long term. If you're exciting, but not secure. If you're lovable, but not keepable. And that thought sits heavy because being left doesn't just hurt your heart, it makes you question your value. When almost relationships keep happening, your brain starts building a story, a quiet one. It says, people like you, but they don't stay. And once that narrative forms, everything starts filtering through it. If someone takes longer to reply, you assume they're losing interest. If someone pulls back slightly, you assume it's the beginning of the end. Because you've seen this pattern before, you've felt the slow fade, the shift in tone, the subtle detachment. So now even when something feels good, you brace yourself. Not because you're negative, because you're tired of being surprised. And the scary part, you start expecting abandonment before it even happens. You hold back. You don't get too excited. You don't fully relax because deep down, you're preparing for them to leave. Not because you're unlovable, but because repetition turned into belief. Fully relax into the connection. Because fully relax into the connection. Because what's the point if it's temporary anyway? You become hyper-aware, watching for changes, tracking energy shifts, reading into silence, and sometimes, without realizing it, you create distance first. You pull back slightly, you act less invested, you test their consistency, not to play games, but to protect yourself, because if they're gonna leave, you'd rather see it coming. But here's the hard truth. When you show up guarded, you don't give love the chance to feel safe. Not because you're toxic, not because you're difficult, but because you're tired. Tired of being surprised, tired of being left, tired of being the one who cares more. So you half show up, and then when it ends, it feels like confirmation. See? They left again. But maybe it's not that you're someone people don't stay for. Maybe it's that you're still healing from the last time they didn't. There's a difference between being left and choosing people who were never built to stay. That's the part we don't always see, because when someone walks away, it feels personal. It feels like they evaluated you and decided you weren't enough. But look closer. Were they consistent from the start? Were they clear about their intentions? Were they emotionally available or just present? Sometimes the pattern isn't that you're not worth staying for. It's that you keep giving your depth to people who only plan to visit. People who like connection but fear commitment. People who enjoy intimacy but avoid responsibility. And when they leave, it reinforces the narrative. No one stays. But maybe the better question is, who have I been choosing? Because when you stop choosing emotionally unavailable people, the pattern changes. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually. You realize you were never hard to stay for, you were just staying with people who were temporary. At some point, you stop chasing permanence, you stop trying to lock something in before it's solid, stop over-investing just to make it last, stop forcing potential into commitment because you realize something. You can't convince someone to stay. You can't love someone into being ready. You can't perform your way into permanence. So instead of gripping tighter, you loosen your hold. You let people show you who they are. You stop rushing labels. Stop fantasizing futures before foundations exist. And something interesting happens when you're no longer desperate for someone to stay. You start attracting people who actually want to. Because permanence isn't built through pressure, it's built through alignment. You don't chase it, you allow it. And when someone stays without being forced, without being convinced, without being chased, it feels different. Not fragile, not uncertain, just steady. At some point, the fear shifts. It stops being, they're going to leave, and becomes, if they do, I'll be okay. That's confidence, not the loud kind, not the I don't care kind, the steady kind. You stop gripping so tightly. You stop overanalyzing every shift. You stop trying to secure permanence too early because you know this. If someone stays, it's because they want to, not because you convinced them, not because you performed perfectly, not because you minimized yourself. And if they leave, it doesn't collapse your identity. It doesn't confirm you're unworthy. It just confirms they weren't aligned. You're not scared of people leaving anymore. You're more concerned with whether they're capable of staying, and that's different because now you're not auditioning, you're observing, and the people who are meant to stay, they won't need to be chased, they won't need to be monitored, they won't need to be reminded, they'll just stay. Being someone people stay for starts with staying true to yourself first, because when you abandon yourself to keep someone else, you teach them that you'll tolerate instability, you over-adjust, over-forgive, overextend, you bend your boundaries so they don't feel pressured, you silence your needs so they don't feel overwhelmed, and slowly, you're the one disappearing. But here's the shift. The more you stay grounded in who you are, the less you attract people who only plan to pass through. When you communicate clearly, when you hold your standards calmly, when you don't chase mixed signals, the wrong people leave faster. And that's not loss, that's filtering. You don't become someone people stay for by shrinking yourself into convenience. You become that by being steady in your worth. The right person won't stay because you made it easy. They'll stay because they respect what you stand on. The right love doesn't feel like survival. It doesn't feel like holding your breath. It doesn't feel like waiting for the other shoe to drop. It doesn't feel like constantly proving you're worth keeping. It feels stable, not boring, not forced, stable. You're not overthinking every text. You're not tracking effort. You're not wondering if today is the day they change their mind. You just feel secure, and that's what you've been craving this whole time. Not obsession, not intensity, not dramatic passion, stability. Because when someone is truly staying, you don't have to fight for reassurance. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to overperform. You don't have to prepare for abandonment. You get to relax. And if you've never experienced that, of course, you start thinking maybe you're not someone people stay for, but maybe you've just never been with someone capable of stable love. There's a difference. At some point, you stop fearing being left. You start expecting to be valued. That's the real shift. You don't walk into connections thinking, how long will this last? You walk in thinking, if this is aligned, it will stay. You stop preparing for abandonment. Stop bracing for the slow fade. Stop assuming you'll have to fight to be kept, because now you know something. If someone leaves, it doesn't mean you weren't worth staying for. It means they weren't built to stay. And instead of internalizing it, you let it pass. You don't collapse. You don't spiral. You don't rewrite your worth. You understand that being valued is the bare minimum. And once you truly believe that, you stop entertaining anything less. You don't chase clarity. You don't beg for reassurance. You don't accept confusion. You expect effort. You expect consistency. You expect intention. And the people who can't offer that, they filter themselves out. So, am I just not someone people stay for? No, I just stopped staying where I'm not valued. There's a difference. For a long time, I thought people leaving was proof that I wasn't enough, not interesting enough, not secure enough, not worth committing to long term. But now I see it clearly. The wrong people didn't stay because they were never meant to build. They were meant to teach. Teach me what inconsistency feels like. Teach me what mixed signals look like. Teach me what I will never accept again. And once you learn that, you You stop chasing permanence, you stop trying to be easier, you stop overproving, you stop bending yourself into something digestible because you realize this. You are absolutely someone people stay for, just not people who are unsure, not people who love halfway, not people who need options. The right person won't need convincing. They won't need time to decide your worth. They won't feel overwhelmed by your depth. They'll feel steady. And this time, if someone leaves, you won't question your value. You'll question their capacity because you're no longer asking, well, why don't people stay? You're asking, are they capable of staying at my level? And that's the shift.